Comic Geek Speak 1885. Top 5 future timelines. Listen to our list of 5 and you'll find. Welcome to Comic Geek Speak. I'm Adam Murdo.
In the year 2000, Levinstein.
And I'm Chris Eberly. Magnificent.
Oh my God, I chose correctly with to start us off tonight, baby.
Holy mackerel. I'm walking on air right now. Man.
Zager and Evans, of course.
And I knew I was going to do the retro music just because it was too fitting for the future.
Absolutely.
But my God, yes. Welcome one and all to the show. We will be joined hopefully shortly by Shane as he's currently indisposed and will be hopefully ready to join us in time to get to the top 5s. If not, we will catch him up when he does get here. But we do have some stuff to take care of first.
Yes, I was just saying that the time bubble's been dispatched to him remotely, and he will join us here in the future.
Yes, indeed. Yep. And we will get to that very, very soon. But before we do get there, as usual, we thank you, the listeners, over at patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak for all that you do for us, keeping us afloat here for as little as $1 a month. You keep the lights on virtually and in the studio. And we thank you so much for that continued support of the show in any way that you can give it. Even those of you who are unable to give donations, just spreading the word about the show or giving us an iTunes review or anything of the sort is just enough to make us happy. And we thank you so much for anybody who manages to do anything of the sort.
Jubilation indeed.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Thank you very much. Patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak. And for some other Comic Geek Speak related matters, I give the floor to Mr. Murdo.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein. Friends, listeners, it's awards season again. You know what that means? It's time for our own annual Comic Geek Speak Best of Awards. And the time has come now here at the beginning of the month of February 2023 to think about honoring the comics and creators that amused us in the year 2022. So this is the time when we usually open the floor to you, our listenership, to contribute to this awards process by filling out a slate of nominees for those comics, creators, etc. that you think are most worthy of further recognition from the year 2022. We're going to be posting a list of all the different categories in which we're seeking nominations. I'm going to read them aloud here now and never again this year. There's 16 categories, and they are as follows, if I can just bring them up on my screen here. Okay, Best New Hero or Team to make its first appearance in 2022. Best New Villain or Villain Team to make its first appearance in 2022. Best New Ongoing Comic, first issue, shipped in 2022. Best Limited Series, last issue, shipped in 2022. Best Single Issue or One Shot. Best Cliffhanger or Moment. Best storyline, either within one series or across multiple series, miniseries, one-shots, etc. Best sleeper or surprise hit. Best ongoing series, which may or may not have shipped its first issue in 2022, could have started earlier. Best graphic album, that's either an original graphic novel or a collection of older material. Best writer, best artist, best writer/artist, one person who does both the writing and the art for a comic project. Best color artist, best letterer, and breakthrough talent of 2022. So, if you'd like to participate in the Best of Nominations process, please take into account those 16 categories and type up an email ballot nominating someone, one person, thing, series, etc. in each of at least 8 of those 16 categories. We'd appreciate it if you nominated something in each of the 16, but if you can't do that, and if you can't think of a good letterer or colorist that you want to nominate, that's fine. Just try to nominate something or someone in 8 of those 16 categories. Otherwise, your ballot will be judged incomplete and we can't count it. And email it to bestof@comicgeekspeak.com by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, March 5th. We're giving you the entire month of February plus a few days to make up your minds about this. We'd really appreciate as much listener participation as possible because it makes it easier for us. And once we've gathered all the ballots together, I will personally tabulate them, and we will then have a special nominations episode of CGS in which each geek nominates his favorite creator or comic, etc., in each of these categories. And whichever person, place, or thing in each category gets the most nominations from you, the listeners, will also find its way onto the ballot. And in the case of a tie, multiple creators, comics, etc., will be put on the ballot as listener nominees. So it's always an exciting time of the year for us. It's a great chance to honor those comics that have given us the most entertainment in the year that has been. And we hope to see a large turnout from you, the listeners, in that process. So
Hear, hear.
We got till March 5th, folks. Oh, and one additional announcement. This is something that's been in the wind here in the Best of offices for a few years now. It was most recently suggested to us by a comic forums member named Phaser, but it's been suggested by a few other people over the years as well. This year, I think we're going to make it official. We're still calling the awards as a whole the Comic Geek Speak Best of Awards, but each individual award will be nicknamed a Jamie.
Yes.
In honor of our departed brother, Jamie D.
Here to that.
Do your part and determine to whom and to what those Jamies will be awarded this year, 2023.
Yep. So vote for apes. Vote for lops.
Murd, thanks as always for doing all the heavy lifting on this.
Also a note that both Toms are not breakthrough creators anymore. So Tom Taylor and Tom King, they've broken through, ladies and gentlemen. They've broken through. Just to keep that in mind.
I think we made that official a couple of years ago. It's a one-time only award, and if you win it once, you're ineligible.
Exactly, because you've broken through, damn it. You've broken through. Nicely done. All right. So in the vein of related to Comic Geek Speak, I just wanted to mention real quick that we have about a week left to go on a Kickstarter by longtime friend of the show and participant of the show, the one and only Steve Bryant. As Steve has a Kickstarter running for a new comic called Evie and the Helsings. And it looks really awesome. I've already backed the digital copy. Digital copy is available for $10 on the website in order to get things going. But listen to this description. For centuries, the Van Helsing family has protected humanity from things that go bump in the night. The last protector has fallen, and the mantle goes to her one surviving heir. The problem is, Evie Van Helsing just wants to rock. Evie in the Helsings is Buffy the Vampire Slayer meets This Is Spinal Tap by way of Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Wow.
Yep. It's a great way of describing it, and looking at the preview artwork for this, it looks amazing.
Wow, look at that.
I've seen that promo image before. Steve has not lost his touch at all.
Absolutely. It's already made its goal, so this is definitely happening. But I highly suggest that you get on this bandwagon one way or the other. I mean, just look at this first cover here for Evie and the Helsings. It just looks right up my alley in so many different ways. I love the 80s vibe of the cover, like their look, everything. Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yep. And actual physical media. I had to buy a CD burner not too long ago because I still had a couple of CDs that I didn't have digitally. I'm like, I should probably actually have something that still plays CDs around when I do need it. You never know when you're going to need that stuff. But yes, $10 will give you the digital copy. And then from there, $15 gets you a physical copy of the main cover for Evie and the Helsing. Evie and the Helsings. And then $20 gets you the variant edition by Steve Bryant and Jason Millay. And of course, not just Steve involved with this, as a longtime friend of the show, Chris Murrin is the editor of this project. It's got some great pedigree along with it, and it's well worth your time do check it out. eviandthehelsings.com will get you directly to the Kickstarter, or just go to Kickstarter.com and search for Steve's name, and you'll find the project there as well. So Evie and the Helsings.
Great title.
Yes, indeed. Alrighty, so let's get things rolling here. Once again, Shane will hopefully be able to make it here, and we will catch him up when he does happen to join. But let's talk about this particular top 5 that we have brewing here. This one is top 5 future timelines, and it was suggested. We did a huge thread on the comic forums for some top 5 suggestions. And this one was mostly suggested. I think it was originally top 5 futures, if I remember correctly, and then Murd modded it a little bit to top 5 future timelines because it felt like it fit there a little bit more. But there's a lot of wiggle room here, just like there is for most of our top 5s. You know, what is a future? That's a question that's going to be asked. Does a sequel count as a future? If it's set, you know, after the main comic or main property, is that considered a future? Well, I'm sure there'll be plenty of wiggle room going on here in one way or the other for this particular rundown of top 5s. But I loved it, and I love compiling it, and I can't wait to see what you gents will put on your lists.
Timey-wimey, Levy-poo, timey-wimey.
Mm-hmm. As usual, somewhere Pants is saying, this is our hill. Our
mm-hmm.
Yep.
I can hear his clarion call in my head.
You got it. So anything that we suggest is our suggestions, and there are suggestions today. They might not be our suggestions tomorrow. They might not be our suggestions next Tuesday, but they are today, and that's what matters the most.
Salient disclaimer as always, Ian. Well said.
Indeed. And of course, please do feel free to head to the forums or the supergroup once this is all said and done and give your top 5s for this very list, as I'm sure there's going to be stuff that we forget, and that's usually a good way for us to remember, is you guys mentioning afterwards and us going, damn it, I wish I'd remembered that.
Every time.
Yep. All right, so let's start things off with our number 5s. And we will list our list first, and then we'll get into further detail once we go back around. But Chris, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is the Grendel Prime timeline.
Ooh, nice. Murd.
Mine is the future of the Private Eye.
Oh, magnificent.
Okay. And mine, with the wiggle room beginning, but I do highly consider this to be a future in a lot of different ways. The Legend of Korra.
Okay.
Yep. All right, Chris, go right ahead.
So I was back in I guess it was the late 90s, and the Grendel Warchild miniseries came out by Matt Wagner. I can see Ian's already checking the year because that's how good a producer he is. And it was my first experience of the Grendel character. I'd heard about the Grendel character, the comic character, but I'd never read anything. And I just, the art, the imagery, it just struck me. So I picked up I think I got the trade first, if I remember correctly. Then maybe I went back, got the issues. But if you love, a Mad Max type apocalyptic future combined with political intrigue, and a messianic like figure who may or may not be a sort of a savior. This is the story for you. Again, the Grendel, there he is. There's Shane. Suddenly everything's okay. Everything is now okay.
Good timing, sir. Good timing.
Brother, we just started. So I'm describing my number 5. What is your number 5, Shane?
Oh, good heavens. Okay. Let me back up.
All right.
There you go.
At first I was thinking alternate realities, but that's not right. It's future.
Yes.
Future alternate or just future?
Future timelines.
Whatever you want to do.
Yep.
Technically, they're all alternate until they happen.
Yeah. Right. So
we're as I stated before you came on, Shane, it's wiggly wobbly, it's timey wimey, whatever the heck you want it to be works.
Yeah, I tend to cheat on these.
Cheat your butt off, my friend. It's
well,
we've already covered the our hill, our beans postulate. So.
All right. Well, who did their 5 already?
So
I was just starting.
We were just starting. My number 5 is Legend of Korra, and Murd, your number 5 again as a refresher.
The Private Eye.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
So good. And mine is Grendel Prime.
Yep.
Oh, good heavens. All right. I'm going to go with something off the wall. I have not read every issue of it, but I love it. Futurama.
Yes.
All right.
I can't wait to get to talk more about that, which is coming back soon. So how about that?
Is it? Well,
Yep.
that's right. It was announced and nothing ever happened with it.
Yep, it's still happening. Apparently, this year 20 episodes are happening. That's
Wow. Hot zingers.
Yep, let's get Chris back to his Grendel Prime, and we'll roll back around to Shane.
All righty.
Dookly.
So, the Grendel Prime, really, with the War Child storyline, is where they really start to explore this cybernetic future Grendel Prime, this warrior who is the sort of the champion of the now fading like Grendel Khanate that ruled the earth, that was inspired by the Komiko Hunter Rose Grendel from the past, that kind of took his visage and they made this whole militaristic sort of totalitarian empire out of it. It's fascinating. And there's stories that then come out of the War Childs. There's a whole universe basically that explores this future Earth and the place that the Grendel, there it is, the Grendel Prime warrior in that. And again, as I said, if you love Mad Max, if you like dystopian stories, it's remember Matt Magner is at the helm. This is his creation, and it's magnificent. The violence is wow. It's really jarring, but it serves the story, and it's brutal. But it's in keeping with the tone, and that the Grendel Prime is trying to shepherd and protect the offspring of the, I want to say, the last Grendel Khan, maybe something like that. I don't want to say too much more, but the Grendel universe is so involved because you have the Hunter Rose stuff, which takes place, in the 80s when Komiko was publishing it, and then this stuff is well into the future. For me, it was my first experience with the Grendel character, and I've really been in love with that universe ever since. And I think is there going to be a series on Netflix?
No, it was in the works.
Okay.
And then it unfortunately got canceled. I think.
Oh, okay.
Even after 10 episodes were produced.
Oh, wow.
Oi.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's another one of those sticky situations where it could be shopped somewhere, but Netflix has decided not to go forward with it.
All right. Well, that's my number 5.
I'm glad that on the cover that Ian had shown that they explicitly said not for children, in case you were confused about all the red blood being Hawaiian punch for whatever.
Yeah, no, it is definitely not for children.
Just in
oh my
case.
God.
I'll also point out this was from 1992, and it cost $250 in 1992 money.
That's
That's how
pretty
you
high.
know that you're dealing with a prestige comic.
Yeah.
Yep. And let me tell you, it was well worth the money.
Nice. Yep. Very good. All right, Murd, Private Eyes.
Ah, so good.
Private Eye, been watching you
They see your
every move. They see private.
Yeah, a little bit of that sweet Philly soul there. This is a very musical episode.
Shane, you missed Murd's musical introduction. It was magnificent.
Nice,
It was
nice.
kind of Futurama inflected, actually.
Oh,
Listen,
I have
back.
1 degree of separation from Hall & Oates. 2 degrees. Somebody I went to high school with, his father went to school with Daryl Hall back in the day.
Yeah, I think they met at Temple, didn't they?
I don't know that. It's possible.
And a touch. Sorry. Okay.
Sounds about right.
All right, so The Private Eye. This is a comic that was written by Brian K. Vaughan with art by Marcos Martin.
So good.
It was published digital first a few years ago, and then I think Image brought it out in print on paper.
Big, beautiful hardcover, actually.
Yeah, there are probably a lot of Image published comics set in the future that would deserve to belong to one of our lists, but for most of those, I can't be the one to put them on my list because they're in the future for me.
That's right.
Published after 2006, I probably haven't seen it. This one, however, for reasons, I think it's just because the premise appealed to me so strongly. I did make it a point to read that sooner than later. So I have read The Private Eye, at least. Yep, and there's that image. Thank you very much, Ian, as that Marcos Martin artwork. And it is set in the future world of 2076. The main character, I think, is an actual private detective or journalist or something along those lines. And it's set in a world that has experienced what has been termed a cloud burst, which is a figurative rupture in information security across the World Wide Web, where everyone's private information came coursing out to be viewed by it. It became public knowledge, and it was so devastating to people's private lives that people took to wearing wacky costumes, such as seen in this bit of art that Ian has put up here, which is the cover image for the trade, in public. Basically, people have to dress up as internet avatars to leave their house, for fear of exposure or connection to all the embarrassing private information that was released in the cloudburst. And I remember that the hard-boiled protagonist had a crusty old grandfather who was of Generation Z, who would be like a teenager in the early 2000s or 20-teens, who was all gruff and defensive about the social media practices of his generation. We're proud of all that we shared.
That's so true.
To be perfectly honest, I don't remember all that much about the characters or the plot of this story, but my approach to this whole top 5 future timelines list that we're doing here is future as setting, of not so much stories or characters set in a specific in the future, although that can certainly play into it. But I think of it more as the world building of the future realm in which those stories take place. And that is what really just enchanted me about The Private Eye. It's been rare thus far for any writer to think seriously about the future ramifications of this social media landscape that we've built for ourselves here, and the thin ice on which we're all treading in the use thereof. And he extrapolated that into a great, fun story with all these great wacky costume visuals rendered so skillfully by Marcos Martin. And it just kind of sticks in my eye as a great social commentary, science fiction take on the future that we've had within the past few years of comics. And I thought, what the heck, I'll put that in there in my top as my number 5.
Merv, I love the way you've set this up, because you've whet people's appetite to read the story without really giving much away. And I want to second, because I love The Private Eye, and I want to second your selection. They're a wonderful creative team. We talked about Ian, I just talked about it last time, the detective story they're doing now.
The Encyclopedia Brown.
Friday. Right,
yeah.
Everything that team does is just gold.
Yep. I don't think I picked that up. I know I remember being solicited and seeing it and thinking it looked good, but I don't think I picked it up yet.
Yep. Well,
Shane, are you going to be joining us in the near future?
Only if my time loop holds out.
Okay, because I can lend you. No, I mean actually in person.
Yes, probably. Yeah.
Excellent, because I can lend you my copy.
Okay.
Yep. Well, there we go. But yeah, no, Marcos Martin is one of my favorite artists in general, and he's able to do mood, I think, better than any other artist in the business, and this works wonderfully for that. So good pick, Murd. Good pick.
All right, Shane, take us to the year 3000 or so.
So I know it's a massive cartoon, and that's where I first watched it. It is hilarious. It's set in the future, but it's still relevant to everything that was happening in today at that time, and still continues to do so. Mm-hmm. When Bongo Comics started to produce it, I would pick up an issue here and there, and it still read the same to me as the cartoon did. And then there was that massive Crisis-esque crossover with The Simpsons, which was fantastical. Mm-hmm. It's a social commentary and relevant while being comedic at the same time. And it weaves in and out of pop culture references like crazy throughout the cartoon, throughout the comic books, anything I read. It is just hilarious to me. And there's always a serious point to it, and there's always, you can look at it and you can laugh at it and enjoy it, but it's generally being a commentary for something that's going on in the world. Mm-hmm. And while you can laugh about it, if you think about it, you might get a little bit sad because it's probably not wrong. But just the whole creativity of it and what they threw into the year 3000 with the same kind of problems we have now and the same kind of stupidity that goes on still happening without much change, even though it's just set in space.
The human condition, Jane.
Yeah. So I think a lot of what Futurama can be summed up in is really in that first 30 seconds after Fry got frozen in the original episode, and you see the Earth just get destroyed over and over and over again, and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild.
Yep.
Nothing. More things change, the more they stay the same, and that show and the comic book just exude a lot of fun for me to read and look at.
We've even seen time itself go back.
Oh my God!
A couple times.
Oh my God!
On Futurama.
I know I'm cheating really talking about the TV show more than the comic, but that episode is one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah.
And then when they finally come back and they're just a few feet off the ground in the wrong.
Oh, okay. I thought we were talking about the one with the chronotons and the.
Well, that's good too. That's good too.
That's pretty good too. Yeah.
But yes, the late Philip J. Fry is the one. Which borrows from the Time Machine movie and from a lot of other stuff also.
It's so easy to read that book and hear the voices just come through clearly. I just love it. I really should go back and try to pick up more of the issues and just read the whole entire series if I can, because it's hilarious.
It's great. I still very much prefer that comic book crossover of The Simpsons and Futurama to the actual Futurama Simpsons animated crossover that eventually happened.
Yeah.
I think it makes a lot more sense to have done it the way that they did rather than try to set them both in the same universe. It was very, very weird that way.
Right, because in the comic book, there was the Futurama characters found a way to bring the Simpsons, who were just cartoon characters in their reality, to life in the future. And because they were fictional human beings, they had no legal rights, so they were immediately put to work as slave labor.
Yep, exactly.
That's a very Futurama approach to it. I agree, Ian. That was a better way to do it.
Yep.
I have a very nice slipcase hardcover of that on myself.
As do I. I forget where I got it for discount, but I remember getting it for discount. It might have even been in Midtown, actually, now that I think about it. It might have been on sale for 50% off, and I was like, I need this. This.
Yep.
Good stuff. Yes, as said, it will be coming back for at least 20 episodes sometime this year.
That's awesome.
Talking of futures as world building, Matt, I remember around 1999 or 98, when Futurama was about to debut on Fox, Matt Groening remarked on his how his vision of this future came to be, and he was drawing on his experience as a young boy watching old Flash Gordon serials. And then when he was a little bit older, he saw 1984 for the first time. And, oh, God, when are the space police going to show up and save everybody? And it never quite happens. That was his rude introduction to dystopias. And he decided for Futurama he was going to try to kind of split the difference between the two, but make it funny. So he came up with a world where there were space police who could show up to save everybody, but they were every bit as violent and stupid and ineffectual and incompetent as human beings tend to be in the present day. It's a shiny future, such as he saw in Flash Gordon, but nobody's gotten any smarter since the 20th or 21st century.
Yeah, that's true.
Hence the social commentary. And yes, Shane is absolutely right. It does engage quite a bit with the pop culture and the social issues of the present, and it tended to do that more and more often.
Oh yeah.
As the series wore on.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I still kind of enjoy the brief first season.
Mm-hmm.
It's still one of my favorite seasons of the whole show's run, because it's the future still felt like kind of an alien place, but the further along you got, the more it just kind of feels like an extension of the 20 or early 21st century problems.
Yeah.
Just writ large and writ futuristically.
I have gotten to visit Fry's house. Fry's house is in Brooklyn, in Ditmas Park, in my old neighborhood, because one of the creators of Futurama lived in that neighborhood. So
nice.
His parents' house is Fry's house.
Wow.
Nice.
So that was awesome. And
do they have a sign outside or anything? Fry's? Oh,
nope. You just have to know, because at least last I was there, it was still painted the same. So it still have the same color to it.
Wow.
Tell that if it's been written up in a couple of magazines as if you ever wanted to try to find Fry's house in real life, it's here and it's in Brooklyn. Go check it out.
Nice.
One of my favorite gags in that show is when they all hop aboard Bender, and he says, "This is the B train stopping wherever I feel like it. Stand clear of the closing doors." And then they winds up driving them to Newkirk Avenue, which is my old subway stop, and they get off in New York right there, and it's
and they picked up a homeless person along the way.
Yes, they did.
End of the line, pal.
Good times. Love that show. King of the Hill's coming back too, by the way.
Really?
I didn't like that one as much.
Yep. Yeah, King of the Hill. It will be set in 2023, so Bobby will be grown and be, whatever the next generation is from the looks of it. So should be interesting. All right, so my pick for my number 5 is Legend of Korra. And it is the future of the Avatar: The Last Airbender world, because that entire show happened. It had its seasons, and then 70 years later, that's where Legend of Korra picks up. And what's great about it is that in order to get the idea of it being 70 years later, they set it in a city setting, which has never happened on Avatar: The Last Airbender in the Aang era really at all. Even when they were in Ba Sing Se, it felt like a very traditional ancient city. While this is a lot closer to like 1930s New York in its general setup. It's very steampunk and very that level of technology. And 70 years later, this is a very different setup for an Avatar as well. As when Aang was trying to learn how to be the Avatar, he was literally the last Airbender, and trying to learn along the way and pick up after being gone for years. While Korra is basically handed everything. She is a waterbender who finds out that she is the next Avatar and then has to learn all the other bending skills in order to master that and keep peace in the world. But the world has changed a lot since Aang's era. Even though there's no, war with the Fire Nation, there's still sects that are anti-bender, and there's villainy out there that has to be fought. And I think they did a really, really good job of emphasizing that in the series, and making it a unique and different take set in the same world that legitimately felt like you'd gone 70 years into that world's future. Huge fan of it. Apparently there's going to be a new series now set even further from that they're working on in Nickelodeon, either a series of movies or an actual animated series that's going to jump to whoever the next Avatar is from here. But I love the series, and I love this future that was brought to us. So yeah, Legend of Korra is my number 5.
All right, great pick.
And I will mention that there were some excellent comic books that either filled in gaps or continued the series after Legend of Korra concluded as an animated. So any of you comic book fans that are looking for continuations or to just know more about the world, you could pick those up pretty easily. And Gene Lin Yang put out the original Avatar comics that continued Avatar: The Last Airbender. These are not by Gene Lin Yang, but they're from some other great creators that have decided to continue the world in one way or the other. So very, very good stuff.
Brethren, I want to compliment us. Already a very diverse top 5 just in the first category. Outstanding.
You're here to that. All right. Onward to our number 4s. And Murd, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is The Land of Ooh.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Jake. Not Jake from Steak Farm, the other one. Chris, what is your number 4?
All right. Comrades in Arms, I need a judgment from you. I'm not really sure about the selection. Out of the 5 slots, 1, 2, and 3 are a lock. 4, I have like 6 different possibilities. I've chosen, but I'm not sure if it fits the bill. Murray can especially probably give a judgment here.
Mm-hmm.
All-Star Superman.
Ooh.
Yes or no? I'm not sure.
I don't know if I quite call that a future.
Yeah. I don't think I would either. It's more like a composited, idealized.
Okay, then throw that out. All right. Then my number 4 is Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow?
All
And
right.
that'll do.
That's a good
Yep.
one.
Yep.
That'll definitely do. Yep.
I didn't even think of that one.
My number 4, the MC2.
Oh,
Right, right.
And Shane, your number 4.
Mine is Spider-Man 2099 and Doom 2099.
oh,
Excellent.
indeed.
They're the
All right,
only
Murd.
2 of the 2099s I read.
Me too, Shane. Me too.
Yeah,
I would argue they're the two best.
Agreed.
There was some X-Men stuff that was pretty good, but yes, I would agree. All right, Murd. Ooh.
All right. The Land of Ooh, if you don't know, is it's the setting of Adventure Time with Finn and Jake, which was an animated series on Cartoon Network, and it also found its way into comics for 75 issues and several specials, and even a couple of original graphic novels, some of them written by our pal Daniel Corsetto,
Yes.
put out by Boom Studios. And it's the high concept I would give to Adventure Time is Commandy in Oz. It's set in this really interesting and sometimes surreal, sometimes humorous, sometimes terrifying fantasy realm called the Land of Ooh. That's 3 O's. And it's the adventures of Finn, who is Finn the human. He is apparently the last boy on Earth, to coin
Not
a
the
phrase.
Stormtrooper.
Yep. Definitely not the Stormtrooper. And his pal, the talking shape-shifting dog, Jake. And there's a map of Ooh, wow. On the ball as always. Thank you.
Wow.
Yep.
I don't know if I ever saw that.
Yeah, this is from one of the Adventure Time art books that came out that gave us a little bit of a behind the scenes map of what it looks like.
Huh.
Yep.
Now, at the beginning of the show's run, it's not really clear what kind of place Ooh is. It's just kind of another fantasy realm. But eventually we get little hints here and there that Ooh is actually more familiar than we think it is. And then at some point, there's kind of a Planet of the Apes reveal that shows us that the Land of Ooh is actually the planet Earth. Just in some kind of strangely warped post-apocalyptic future. I mean, I remember there was one episode where some characters flew out into space so we could see Earth from an orbital standpoint, and it kind of looked like a big cracked egg with lots of strange little surreal features on it.
Huh.
It's the story of this kid who, like Kirby's Commandy, is basically the last kid on Earth, except instead of having adventures with nothing but humanoid animals, as if that weren't fun enough, Finn gets to have adventures with humanoid animals and talking candy and little anthropomorphic Nintendo Game Boy people and lots of princesses, 45 different flavors of princesses. Just every amusing little character you can imagine. He gets to go out and have Dungeons and Dragons style dungeon crawls. He gets to hunt monsters. He gets to eat different baked goods. He gets to do all kinds of interesting, fun stuff. Sometimes the stories are tragic and heart-wrenching. And there was one episode towards the end of the show's run that gives us a little more insight into how the world got it this way. And this is it's the backstory for Finn's archenemy, the Ice King. And we learn that he, back before whatever cataclysm occurred to make the Earth turn into the Land of Ooh, he was an archaeologist named Simon, and we see him having adventures with this little vampire child whom he's adopted as his ward. He's being kept alive by this enchanted crown he's found. It keeps him alive, it gives him ice powers. It's slowly driving him insane, however, so that eventually he becomes the Ice King. But we see the two of them navigating the ruins of what is clearly North American culture, and they encounter some life forms that are just they were once human beings, but they're kind of oozing and, slowly over a period of generations mutating into, intelligent candy people, which is one of the main races that inhabit the Land of Ooh in Finn's time in the future. So, yeah, it's based on the show's creator's own imaginings and his little backyard adventures when he was a kid, when he had nothing. He was economically disadvantaged. He had nothing to play with as a kid but his imagination. So he would run out into the backyard and make up these adventures, and eventually he developed them into an animated show, which was, pretty darn successful.
Oh, sensation, my God.
Yeah, it was.
The kids loved it when they were growing up.
I can remember my kids watching it sometimes.
And he basically just threw in any product of his imagination he felt like it. It was extremely eclectic. It was fun sometimes. It was heart-wrenching sometimes. It was horrifying sometimes. It was a future realm that I, as a lover of childhood fantasy, as a great lover of the Land of Oz, it's a future realm that I wanted to go exploring in.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that probably ought to be it's the closest thing to an Oz realm that I can think of in terms of alternate future timelines. So I just slipped that right in there at number 4.
I'm so glad you did, Murd, because Adventure Time to this day it was on my list of top 5 animated series of our adulthood for a reason, and it is one of those shows where talk about a slow burn because first season you don't really know much about the world outside of the fact that it's kooky, it's crazy, there's insane stuff going around, and there's at least one human. And then by the time you get to the end of that show, it's like it's a Marvel Universe level, chronology continuity, where if you've been following the show the entire time, there's that much building and that much world growth and acceleration that's gone on that it's superb what they managed to pull off in that show.
And my older son Ricky, he's now 21, he was watching it. He was a kid when it was out, and he recently went back to watch it again. He told me he's getting so much more out of it now.
Oh, I love that.
He didn't realize when he was 12 or whatever it was when he was watching it, which only speaks again to the complexity and the sophistication of the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Ice King stuff alone, like that is some deep level, like diving into depression and trying to find yourself in your own mind. It's great stuff. Great stuff. All right, Chris, get right ahead.
Okay, so I think in some ways Murd is more qualified to discuss this book than I am, but and we've talked about this book many times throughout the history of CGS. I mean, I don't think it's hyperbole to say it's one of the most important comic book stories, certainly in the history of DC Comics.
Yeah.
Probably in the history of comics in general, but just, for those who run like a desert island or something, or have not read whatever happened, or maybe they've never gotten around to it, please. This is one of the most important superhero stories ever put to page in the comic book medium.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's hyperbolic. Again, just quickly, it's Alan Moore's sort of farewell to, Murray, would you say, to the pre-crisis Superman?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And very befitting, a future. Oh, thank you, Ian. A future timeline story. Characters die. There are cataclysmic events that occur that you would associate with a future timeline. There's moments of transcendence in terms of the history of characters, their characterization, their relationships, and yet what's so amazing about this story at the end is that it is the essence of Superman. Mm-hmm. And anybody who's read it, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't. And I didn't mean to be dismissive before. If you haven't read this book, please, as a lover of the medium, people must read this story because it's a masterpiece. It's just 2 issues. Yeah. They've reprinted it a million different ways.
Oh, yeah.
It's just 2 issues. But the ending of it is Superman.
It ends with a wink.
It's
so many
Superman.
Superman stories have over the years.
And it's poignant. I mean, like I said, and it's violent. Like there's stuff happening in it. Like, whoa. But it's very much befitting of a future timeline where careers can just kind of do whatever they want.
Yep.
And Moore is so reverent to the history of the character, the various supporting casts that appear, different villains, allies of Superman. Murd, I forgot. What did Perez drew one and then
Perez inked it actually.
Okay,
and Kurt Swan.
Kurt Swan. That's right. Okay, thank you. Yep. But I don't want to go into it too much because, in case for this people who have not read it, I don't want to spoil it. But it is. I don't use the term lightly. It is a masterpiece of the medium.
It truly is.
It was in the regular series though, right? It wasn't a special.
It was the last issue of Action and Superman, right, Murd?
Well, it was the last pre-crisis issue.
Right.
The last issue of each of those. One issue of Action, one of Superman before, the John Byrne changes took effect.
Yeah. In fact, here's the with a picture of Alan Moore in the middle. Here's the covers of both of those issues as they were. I remember getting both of those issues off eBay in the mid 2000s and reading them for the first time. And just being taken away by just the majesty of it all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think the first time I read it was not too far from that, Ian.
Well, anyone who loves, or even if you don't have to have the most in-depth grasp of Superman's comic universe to appreciate what's going on in the stories. If you at least know the general mythos and the characters and the relationships, you're really going to walk away from with a lot. I mean, it's a masterclass, man. What a story.
And am I the only one surprised that there has not been an animated movie of this yet? Because I feel like they've done All-Star Superman, they've done tons of Batman movies at this point. They've done Superman Red Son, for example.
Superman
Red Son. Yeah. This is ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
Just because very few stories, I feel like, get to the heart of Superman, even as it's his quote unquote last adventure, more so than this 2-issue arc. And there's so much depth to it for 2 issues. You could easily make a 75-minute movie out of it.
In a way, I'm kind of relieved no one has tried yet. Because, number one, I've often felt that their animated adaptations of various comic book stories, sometimes they work well, but more often I find that they fall a little bit shy of the level of quality of the original. And for another thing, one of the reasons that this story works so well, and for us, as invested fans, we know what the subtext of this is. It's a farewell to the Superman of the past several decades of story. We knew that the crisis on Infinite Earths has happened, and that the John Byrne reboot is waiting on the threshold. And we know that this is Alan Moore's tearful, poignant farewell to a version of Superman that a couple generations of fans had known.
Right.
They put that into an animated movie today. I mean, I don't think that extra level of meaning would be present, and it would be less affecting as a result.
Fair enough. But yeah, great pick, Chris. Great press.
Yes.
Was it
actually shamed me, Chris, because I did not even think of this.
No,
really, Murd?
Think of that either.
I've often called it my
That's why we do these.
single comic book story of all time, and yet I didn't think of it in terms of a future story, but it definitely is.
They did
Murd was spoken.
a Batman version of that in recent years.
Yeah,
In the last whatever happened to the Cape Crusader? Was it Grant Morrison?
Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman.
It was Neil Gaiman and one of the Kuberts, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it was a great story.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Not as much as Superman, but I enjoyed it.
It's just very different. Than what because obviously completely different mind, completely different setting, completely different style, but nevertheless,
different purpose.
Very different purpose as well. Yeah, but nevertheless, a very well done tale.
And sometimes, I know I have a hardback of each that came out about the same time. That's how I read the Superman one. I can't remember if they collected them both together. Like if somebody was interested to read both, it's possible.
With trades, it's always possible, Shane.
I just can't remember.
Every possible combination is often out there.
This is true. This is true.
For the most part, where you find whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is in that we've mentioned it before on the show, that Alan Moore collection.
Oh yeah.
They also did a deluxe hardcover of it as well.
Yep.
Which I think is what I have.
Yeah. So good stuff.
I think I have both. I may actually have it 3 times that way because I have two versions of Alan Moore's trades because there were things in one that weren't in the other, and I'm like, well,
that's right. Yep.
I pretty soon I'll be doubled up on the Death of Superman as I'm DC Infinite Plus, and they're now offering a hardcover for free for anybody who is DC Infinite Plus. So I went and put my order in the other day. So looking forward to that. Yep.
And I had just ordered the hardback that collected the whole Death of Superman. I just got it in my shipment.
Oh boy. Yes. Hi. I'd like to return this. No reason.
No, I'll see if Ben wants to read it.
All right.
I wasn't going to pass up the free order, so I put that in.
Oh, of course. Yeah, and you get the special Dan Jorgens cover with that one too. So why not? So my number 4 pick was the MC2, otherwise known as Marvel Comics 2, but nobody ever called it that. They only ever called it the MC2. This is a world that is near and dear to my heart. I know, Chris, you enjoy it as well. But it's basically, what if the 90s mattered? As a 90s
They mattered.
Hey, trust me, I know they did. But in comics, so much of that stuff got thrown under the rug for various reasons. For one thing, Peter Parker and Mary Jane's child.
Don't even get me started on that. That still sticks in my craw.
That was officially for me, one, like more so than the Clone Saga itself. That was a death knell for me enjoying Spider-Man for a large period of time, because for them to just whisk that baby away and like throw it into the Bermuda Triangle and be like, nah, what baby? What are you talking about? Was just it was negligent and it was stupid.
Totally agree. But we got, I mean, you and I would agree, we got a great series out of it, which is Spider-Girl.
Absolutely. Yep. And this is the adventures of that eventual grown daughter, Mayday Parker, in the Marvel future, in a world where her father Peter has retired. He has a bum leg. Had a one epic fight with Norman to wind things up, and then retired from there. And eventually we got Spider-Girl. But it's not even just Spider-Girl. You get A Next, which was a great continuation of the Avengers in that world. You had J2, which was kind of a Shazam-esque take on Juggernaut. Juggernaut has a son, and this is his adventures. The Fantastic Five.
That's right.
Which included a Ben Grimm with a robotic arm, Elijah the Squirrel, and Johnny Storm, and a fully grown Franklin, plus a robot that they believe is Reed Richards. That later turns out to be a little bit different than what they think it is. But that was all pretty cool. And there were other characters that were thrown in there as well.
What was the Wolverine analog? Was it his daughter or something like that? Or
yes, it was.
I forgot her name.
Her name, Wild Thing.
Yes, that's right.
That's it.
The daughter of Wolverine and Elektra, of all people.
That's right. That's right.
Yep. And
I thought Spider-Girl was the best of the bunch, though, in terms of the story quality.
Yeah, no question about it. I'd say A-Nex is probably right there with it. It didn't last nearly as long,
and she had a pretty lengthy run. In fact, the fans got so upset something canceled, they actually brought it back because of fan demand.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that started in a What If issue.
Yep.
Which I had, and at one of its peaks, I sold. Sometimes I wish I wouldn't have.
That fetched a few dollars. Yep.
It did me well when I sold it.
In many ways, it's the best thing DeFalco ever did. I feel like is Spider-Girl.
Well, you had wonderful Pat Olive art, and I want to say Ron Frenz drew it later.
Ron Frenz is actually the co-creator because he drew.
That's right.
And then from there it was Olive,
right, on
the main series, and then Frenz came back to it after Olive left.
But what's great about the series, if I may jump in for a moment, is that because DeFalco wrote Amazing Spider-Man with Frenz for a period of time in the 80s. And they bring a lot of that history into the story. Like, you mentioned Norman Osborn and Mary Jane, of course, is there. And they explore what going on, with the Osborn family. And it's really well done. Like, they really explore the history of Spider-Man if it continued into this timeline in which the whole, theme of this top five. So great choice. I didn't even think of Spider-Girl. I
have that as an alternate somewhere on here.
Nice. And some of the best things about this too is that it was the first time we had a superhero Cassie Lang.
That's right.
She later became Stature in the main universe, but she was Stinger, one of the members of A-Next. You had the niece of Shannon Carter running around as American Dream. And you had the son of Kevin Masterson as Thunderstrike.
That's right.
Yep.
And wasn't oh God, I'm terribly. Who was Al Williamson inked that book?
Yes,
Al Williamson inked that book. So I actually have a page from it I cherish where they retell the origin of the Green Goblin, the original. They show him like putting the mask on and the explosion in the lab, and it's one of my favorite pieces of original art. But and they really show you, like, they do the classic May in high school. She's going through all those trials and tribulations, trying to balance that with being this new hero, learning the ropes, and also the anxiety of her father, which is a constant theme in the story, in the book. about what she's dealing with. It's very well done.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't sweep Ben Reilly under the rug. I mean, we have a whole Ben Reilly thing going on right now in Marvel Comics. That's something very, very different than this. But this just remembered who Ben was, and that's why she wears the costume that she does. She finds Ben's costume in the attic and mods it to become her Spider-Girl costume.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I love so many things when they use Ben Reilly for stuff. I mean, I know sometimes the Clone Wars gets the Clone Saga gets a rap, but I enjoyed it well enough that when Ben Reilly came out after that, I followed him for years and years. Anywhere that he showed up, man, I was picking up the book to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I was a huge fan of it at the time as well. Wasn't a huge fan of what they did to the character, nor how they got rid of the character. But no. That's comics.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah,
darn tootin' on that one. So, all right, Shane.
All right, Spider-Man 2099 and Doom 2099. They are the two that I read the most of. I tried Ravage and I tried X-Men and was it? X-Men Legacy?
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, I did not like Ravage.
Punisher 2099 as well.
Yeah, I tried that. I didn't like that either. But for whatever, I mean, Spider-Man 29 was easy. That was just, for me, a new take on Spider-Man, something interesting set in the future, just a lot of fun to read.
That's
for me.
Peter David.
Yeah, how could you go wrong? Doom 2099, I can't even remember how I picked it up, but I loved that
I love
book.
Doom 2099. Yep.
I actually thought in a lot of ways that was better than Spider-Man 2099. I'll be honest, I don't remember much about either book. I don't have any of the issues anymore. I don't have trades of them. I'd like to get them at some point. I don't even know if they're on the Marvel app that I could read them.
I'm pretty sure they are. Maybe
I'll have to somehow bookmark those and try to get through those. But I just remember being absolutely enthralled with them when they were coming out. And I followed it for a couple years. And then stopped like so many other things. But I absolutely applauded Marvel for trying that and making that little futuristic universe and having so much put into it for as long as they did. But Spider-Man 2099 and Doom, especially Doom, was just fantastic.
The great thing about the Doom issues, and I haven't read them many years either, Shane, but I read most of the series, was that they kept teasing as to whether or not was this actually Victor Von Doom.
Yeah.
And
even he wasn't sure.
Yeah, and he wasn't like that was one of the great sort of plot threads throughout much of the series. Now, Ian, who was the original writer in that series? I've forgotten.
On Doom?
Doom 2099.
Let me look that up.
I think Warren Ellis came in later, if I remember correctly.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah. Doom 2099, let's see. He was created by John Francis Moore.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
And Pat Broderick.
And Pat, great artist, and his armor looked awesome. Like the design they had for him in the future. It's really well done.
Yep. Very well done.
Yep. And all 17 issues of Doom 2099 are available on the Unlimited app. And there's also a 2019 return that was only one.
Yeah, I never read that issue. And Spider-Man 2099 lasted a couple years, didn't it? 2, 3?
Yeah.
Longer,
30-something, I think. 30-something issues.
Yeah, something along those lines. And the character is, as you know, become very prevalent and keeps coming back. So that says a lot for what they think of the character.
Well, I'm sorry, Shane, go ahead.
No, it may have been that when Doom ended that I stuck with Spider-Man just a little bit longer, but then was so disgusted that they ended Doom that I just gave up. That's entirely possible. It's entirely possible.
What was great
that
about
sounds like me.
Spider-Man, what's the character's name? Miguel
O'Hara.
Yeah, that again, it's Peter David. So he really developed the personality of Miguel. So you really saw him as a distinct person. You know, he's not like a Peter Parker clone. Even though the history of Spider-Man is clearly there. And I remember, I'm sure, Shane, you read this. At one point, I want to say they did a prestige format where the two Spider-Man met.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that I actually don't remember. No.
Yes, they did.
Do you remember that?
I remember they urged Peter David to use the Ben Reilly Spider-Man.
No, he used Peter Parker
at the time, and he said, "No, thank you. I don't want this to wind up this weird little alternate continuity footnote, so I'm going to use the classic Spider-Man."
And it's excellent.
With Miguel.
And
they
really
even met the
good.
Spider-Man of 2211 in the middle of it all.
And there's a great moment still remember this where it's at the climax. I don't remember even who they're in battle with, but Miguel is actually overcome with tears as Peter emerges to kind of lead him into battle with, like, I think there's other Spider-Man. Like, it's a great moment. I don't remember who drew it, honestly. I'm sorry to say, but Ian's already checking because he's the producer supreme.
I am indeed. I have the cover here. Rick Leonardi, actually.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yep, with Williamson inks for that matter.
Nice.
Yeah, and
that's it. There it is. Yep, there it is.
Don't know if I ever saw that.
Oh, Shane, you'd love this story. It's so good.
And look at this splash page that I came across. Just as a
wow.
Yeah, I mean this is from the Amazing Spider Talk, but yeah, that's that's something else. Stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good. It's a great prestige format one shot.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I really don't think
excellent.
I ever read that.
Yeah, you'd love it, Shane.
There's a lot of Spider-Man 2099 that I need to go back to at some point.
Well, and he's supposed to be prevalent in the upcoming second part for the animated movie, which I can't wait for.
Yep. Which
is it coming out this year?
I thought so.
Yeah, it's supposed to.
Okay, good.
I mean, unless it gets delayed again, it's Across the Spider-Verse, right? Let's see.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called.
Across the Spider-Verse 2023 film that is coming out on June 2nd.
Ooh, summertime.
Excellent.
Love it.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent.
Superb. All right, let's move on to our number threes. And how about Murd, you start us off.
Okay. Marvel's War of the Worlds.
Oh.
Okay. I'm going to go with a different X-Men future than people would probably automatically go to. X-Men Battle of the Atom.
Oh. Nicely done, sir.
Thank you. And Shane.
Batman Beyond.
Yep.
Of course.
I knew that would be in there somewhere.
Yeah, I thought it would be simple, but I can't not put it in there.
No, by all means. And Chris?
Now it starts to get easy for me. One of the best comics of the 21st century, Lazarus.
Brilliant. All right, Murd, go right ahead.
Okay. This is some classic Marvel Bronze Age goodness. It was a feature that ran in Amazing Adventures starting in 1973. It was originally called War of the Worlds. They renamed it after its protagonist, Killraven, after
Don McGregor writing.
Yes, yep. So I'll allow you to enthuse about that momentarily, Chris. But yes, it posits a world. And I'm not sure whether treatments of continuity have varied, but it's a timeline in which H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds novel and the invasion of the British Isles by Martians in the early 20th century actually occurred. Mm-hmm. It's part of of that universe's canon. I'm not sure whether that's part of the 616 timeline or what, but in any event, everything happened the way it did in the novel. The Martians invaded, they dominated humanity over a limited space for a brief time, and then they succumbed to earthly disease and died. And then, a whole century pretty much elapsed. We get into the early 21st century, which, of course, this being 1973, was still safely in the future at that time. And then the Martians invaded again. This time they were a little hardier. They had vaccinated themselves or something. They survived Earth's microbes, and they enslaved the entire planet. And humankind became their chattel. They kept them alive for their amusement or for their sustenance, because they have a taste for human flesh, these Martians do. They look like giant brains with tentacles and giant saucer eyes and little squid beaks on the front of their frontal lobes. They become the masters of Earth. They keep some humans alive and breed them for gladiatorial combat for their amusement. And one such gladiator is a man named Jonathan Raven, who earns the name Killraven in the arena. He breaks free and he joins a human liberation movement. And he and a small group of companions wander around the landscape of North America in this Martian-ravaged 21st century, encountering all kinds of monstrosities and the things that the Martians have wrought on this planet, specimens of their culture, and some truly twisted, treacherous examples of humanity who have actually turned traitor to their own kind and collaborated with the Martians. So they wander across this blasted landscape, having their adventures for, looks like 21 or 22 issues of Amazing Adventures back there in the 70s. Neil Adams was a co-creator of the original concept. It was handed off to a few different creators, but eventually it found its way into the hands of Don McGregor. Chris?
So I've enthused about Mr. McGregor many times in the show because he's one of the reasons why we love the Black Panther, because he wrote the classic jungle action stories concurrently with these stories in the 1970s. And again, McGregor was one of those great writers, still is one of those great writers, who has such a knack for characterization, for world building, and for really bringing sophistication into his characters, their interpersonal relationships. We think of like the world of Wakanda and some of the different characters there. A lot of that's McGregor. And so I haven't read the entire Killraven story, read part of it. But it's the same touch where this is more than just, a slam bang, science fiction story. There's real emotion going on here. There's real exploration of the price of conflict and of what it does to these various characters. And we have to mention the artwork. So, Murd, why don't you talk a little about the artist here, who's one of the great masters of the Bronze Age and going forward.
Unless I misjudge, this is P. Craig Russell we're looking at?
P. Craig Russell, yep. If you've been reading it, like his latest take on Norse mythology with Neil Gaiman, for example, which I know, Murd, you've been reading those. There's several great artists who emerge in like that phase 2 of Marvel in the Bronze Age, and P. Craig Russell is one of them. You think of like Frank Brunner, for example, is another. Alan Weiss, Starlin, so forth. So the artwork in these stories is, I'm looking at the page Ian selected, is absolutely stunning. And, he always brings in that sort of that beautiful fantasy element to his work. If you want to really read, like we talk about essential 1970s comics, this title is one of them. Killraven is absolutely essential if you want to get to what's best in 1970s comics. And Ian, could you charm me for a moment, you or me, and go back to that first cover image you had up, please?
Yeah. Let me see if I still have that. If not, I will bring it up.
Because I have to comment on his outfit.
It looks like Sean Connery's outfit from that.
Yeah,
Zardoz. Yes, it's all roads lead back to Zardoz.
Yes.
That's got to be a retro movie review at some point.
I've never seen it.
Visual design, that is one of the things that attracts me most to this take on the future. I mean,
okay, all right.
It's a very generation take on future dystopia. I mean, it's got science fiction and sword and sorcery and struggle to be free from oppression and whatnot.
So, I wouldn't even call it Zardoz. I would call it WWF.
Yeah. Shane, how quickly do you think Keiko would leave me if I came home wearing an outfit like that?
How long would it take her to stop laughing?
Longer than it would to leave.
Look at those boots. Oh, that's amazing. You're right, though. It does have that Zardoz. What did Zardoz come out, Murd? 1972?
Something like that.
Something like that.
I would have said 73, which of course is exactly the same year that this came out.
Yeah, but wow. But that looks like a Ramita cover, actually. But I'm just having fun. This is a great series, and Murd, it's a great selection.
Yeah.
So
it's got that 70s flair and flamboyance.
Yes.
As evidenced by Mr. Raven's buccaneer boots. They're not even buccaneer, they're thigh boots, for crying out loud.
And I'll also point out that Killraven appeared in our favorite Avengers Forever.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm. As one of the many futures they had to head to as part of the story.
1974 was the movie.
Zardoz?
Yeah.
Okay, so this actually predates Zardoz.
All right.
That's where he got it from.
Clearly. All right. So there have been many different X-Men futures, some of which I'm sure will probably be mentioned before this episode is over.
Oh, yes.
But I went with one a little bit more recent because before Hickman's X-Men, this was easily my favorite X crossover of the last, 20 some odd years.
It's a good story. Good story. Yep.
It really is. And, you had Brian Michael Bendis, Jason Aaron, and Brian Wood working with Cho and Immonen and Esad Ribic and Coleman Coley, huge stars over at Marvel. And the future that was presented here was interesting because at the time in Marvel Comics, just as a refresher, the original 5 X-Men,
it's a great series,
were thrust into what was at the time the present, and rather than go back, decided to stay because they saw the disarray that the X-Men were in, and they were like, well, if we stay, we can help. We can try and change things. And then later on, Battle of the Atom happens, and it's a world in which these X-Men never went home.
Yep.
And these future X-Men then come to try and tell these time-displaced X-Men, no, seriously, you need to go home. Things are even more messed up in the future. And a team that was led by Zorn, otherwise known as Jean Grey, and Charles Xavier II, the son of Charles Xavier and Mystique, long story, a even more deformed beast, the son of Wolverine and Mystique, long story, she gets around, apparently. Molly Hayes of the Runaways, Ice Thing, we at the time think that it's just Iceman gone hulkish or brutish, but there's more story to it, and Deadpool come, and they're like, we're the X-Men, we're telling you that there's a problem. But more than anything else, there's an old Kitty Pryde. And that is the key to any future story. Is that if Kitty Pryde comes back from the future, you're going to listen to her. And that is what they believe has happened here. And they're trying to deal with it until things aren't quite adding up with their stories. Until eventually we find out that this is not necessarily the future X-Men. This is the future Brotherhood. And bad things are going to happen.
Yep.
They wind up further into the future. They find what is the actual X-Men team, including Colossus with a badass beard, Jubilee running around as Wolverine, Phoenix, which is Kid Omega at this point, which is just its own thing. Iceman's running around as an ice wizard. You got Wiccan from the Young Avengers, who's now the Sorcerer Supreme. The daughter of Storm and Black Panther, Chimera, who sticks around in the main universe after this for a little while. I don't know if she's still around, but she was for a bit. And Jubilee's adopted son, Shogo, running around in a Sentinel suit, are these X-Men. And then a whole battle winds up happening. It was creative. It was different than other X titles and X storylines that had come out before. And you're left with this, difficult decision of, do we stick around and believe that this is just a future that we can hopefully avoid and make things even better than it was? Or are we just supposed to go home and let stuff happen? It's a fascinating take. And it's kind of been forgotten now that Hickman's run has happened.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a piece of X history. And I just wanted to make sure that it was mentioned here because at the time in 2013, this got me interested in X-Men again.
And it crossed over with everything that was out there, right?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
With that special banner of.
I'm glad you brought this up, Ian, because I'd actually almost forgotten how good that story is.
I remember that.
And that whole Bendis, the original X-Men come back, that series was excellent.
Yes, it was.
Because they really explored the ramification, like Jean Grey alone, of all these original characters now being in the present. It was very well done.
And Cyclops, for that matter, because Cyclops, young Cyclops, because at the time, Cyclops was kind of in the Magneto role,
right?
The X-Men, off on his own while Wolverine was running the school.
Yep.
A young Cyclops having to deal with the fact that he's kind of a dick right now.
Yeah.
And do I let myself become this or do I become something better? All New X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and Wolverine and the X-Men were the books that it's all crossed over into.
And they were all excellent for a while.
They were. Yeah. Wolverine and the X-Men, I think to this day.
Yeah, it was really good.
That was really good.
Yep. So had to make sure that this was mentioned in a wealth of future timeline X-Men stories. This is one that I do not want to get forgotten. So X-Men Battle of the Atom is my number 3. All right. And we have one more person who still has to tell theirs.
Lazarus.
Yes.
So, okay, I won't belabor because I've mentioned this book so many times with such effusive praise on the show over the years. But when this topic was proposed, this automatically was going to be in my top 5. Especially because the book is so frightening, because what it's describing in many ways could happen, and one could argue already is starting to happen.
Right.
And it's, first of all, it's Greg Ruck and Michael Lark. Michael Lark doing the best work of his entire career, which is saying something. Oh, look at that. God.
Stunning.
So essentially, just to review, in case some listeners have missed it, this is a near future where all world governments have collapsed, and you have corporate families, which, let's face it, in our own reality are running governments from behind the scenes. And in this world, they've come out into the open, and they've carved up the earth into fiefdoms, and these various corporate families control various swaths of the planet, and inevitably their interests are going to conflict. Sometimes they have alliances, sometimes they go into conflict, and each family has a Lazarus, which is a genetically enhanced warrior who serves essentially as the chief enforcer of whatever their policies might be. And again, each family has, an army. Each family has what they call waste, which are the luckless souls who are just like the regular people who are living in their realm. And then they have people who they kind of elevate into being like their minions, who have more privileges. The depth of thought and detail the creators have put into this world is stunning. Each issue has elaborate letters pages, essays. I think there's a role-playing game that's associated with it now as well.
So.
But at the heart of it is about the Lazarus Forever Carlyle, the Carlyle corporate family, who begins to question her place, her very identity, her origins, and it's her journey as she starts to, in a sense, turn against the agenda of her father, of her and her corporate power base. Look at that. The artwork is stunning, as I said, but the sophistication of storyline, because they explore the impact of these families, not only on their immediate, because in each family there's relatives vying for power. There's stabbing each other in the back. There's different agendas, but also the impact on regular people. And that's what's especially so powerful of this title, is that, when we think about, corporations today and the impact they can have on politicians and on policy and how that can affect regular people, you see sort of the dystopian, horrific future of that type of approach, where people who have way too much wealth and therefore way too much political influence, we all know the kind of people I'm thinking of here, and then the outsized impact they then have on everybody else. And if those particular people, shall we say, have idiosyncratic views on certain issues, and if they didn't have that money, you'd think they were some crazy person who'd have no business influencing anybody anywhere, but because they have the money they can. This book then explores the horrific extent of, this final conclusion of something like that. It's amazing. I'm sure it's been nominated for a gazillion Eisners. I haven't followed that, but it's right now it's on hiatus. The past year they did like a quarter like prestige format book, and Ruck announced they're now going to go back to like the floppy format, and they're gonna be ending the book. They have like an end in mind, but it's not going to come back, I want to say, for about a year, I believe. But if you love like future timeline books, this is the book to read, boy. So that's my number 3.
They at one point were going to be making a television adaptation, but there really hasn't been an update since 2017. So I kind of doubt that's happening at this point.
No, I remember hearing about that too. It would be a phenomenal television show if it was done properly.
Yep,
so
definitely. All right, Shane, bring us beyond.
Well, it's easy for this one because it was such a fantastic endeavor to do something a little bit different, yet tie it to the previous Batman animated series.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally they started bringing Batman Beyond into the DC proper universe in various iterations, various miniseries, sometimes regular series, sometimes just crossovers. He's guest starred in, like, there was a Batman tie-in with Booster Gold guest starring in it, which was awesome for like 2 or 3 issues, not too many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun because it's easy to hear Kevin Conroy's voice come through as Old Man Batman, to hear Terry McGinnis's voice. I forget that Will Friedle to voice. It's so easy. Like I don't always like being able to just hear these voices. Sometimes I like to create them, but for this, it's so easy to just fall into that and hear everybody again. I mean, Kevin Conroy is who I hear when I read Batman anyway, but for any of the Batman Beyond comic books, they're just fantastic. I think even one time, gosh, not too terribly long ago, but I think maybe I'm spoiling something, I just don't remember. Tim Drake was thrown to the future and was Batman Beyond for a while, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So he was lost in time in the future. Just a great character, and I wish, really hope that at some point they bring him into the live action world. I think there's such a missed opportunity to not use Michael Keaton as an old man Batman and Batman Beyond to be in a movie somewhere, at least just one. It just screams like it should be so easy to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, God, Kevin, I'm still feeling Kevin Conroy as well.
Yeah.
Nobody did Batman better, and the gruff he was able to put in there as an old Bruce too.
Yeah,
it was such a different take on the character, and it worked wonderfully in the series itself. But you're right. I really do appreciate that they've brought it into comics over the years, whether it be adaptations of the animated or whether it just be, having future Batman stories being told. They've done a pretty good job of that over the years.
Yep, and I hope they continue. Even it's fine if they don't have a continuous series. Not everything needs it, but boy, if they sprinkle in a mini series now and then, that's okay with me. Anything to keep the character alive.
Back for a while there, your boy Jurgens was doing a lot of.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, he was. Yep, it was awesome.
Has there been any animated work with the character lately, Shane, or no?
No. I think the last was when he showed up in Justice League for a couple episodes, and that was
ages ago,
early 2000s.
Yeah. Okay.
If that.
Mid, I think.
Mid.
I want to think I was at Bowling Green when that episode.
I can't remember the years that they were out, but
there was a short that came out near the end of Darwin Cook's life. Actually,
okay.
He was one of the driving forces behind it, where Terry took on all these different iterations of Batman that were all robots.
Right.
Yeah.
It was on with Green Lantern and Teen Titans Young Justice on the Saturday mornings.
Yep.
I think it was in the in-betweens of those two shows. You're right.
Yeah.
That was a great little short.
Yeah, it was only like 3 or 4 minutes, but
and it was only one.
Yeah, just seeing what like that was great.
That might be the last animated version that we've seen since then.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, anytime, and I think Batman White Knight is kind of delving into Batman Beyond, or there's something Batman Beyondish out there like that in recent year or two.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Actually,
Batman Beyond White Knight or something like that. I can't remember.
Looking at Batman Beyond the White Knight, it's called. That's the most recent iteration in that alternate timeline. Yeah. Getting Terry or someone else in the Beyond suit. Looks great, honestly. So I'll.
Oh yeah, I have not read that yet. There was McFarlane Toys. I really try not to get too many of their stuff because I really did like the Mattel DC superhero line that was out in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. But McFarlane Toys did do an awesome Batman Beyond figure, and I did snatch that up. There were 2 versions. One was a Target exclusive, which drove me nuts. But each one has something a little bit different about them. But they're both absolutely fantastic figures. But yeah, any Batman Beyond comic, I'll give a try.
Awesome. All right, we are in our top 2 at this point. And Chris, what is your number 2?
This is not going to be a surprise. X-Men: Days of Future Past.
Well done. Shane, your number 2?
I'm going to go with Kingdom Come.
Excellent.
Okay. Murd?
The Atomic Knights.
Oh, wow.
My number 2, keeping it DC. Mm-hmm. DC 1 million.
That's on my alternate list too.
Yep.
I kind of expected that each of those things would be on each of those lists at about that rank.
Excellent. All right, Chris, go right ahead.
So we've all read this story. Most of our listeners have probably read this story. They adapted into one of the best X-Men films.
Mm-hmm.
The best X-Men film.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Yeah, but
Thirded.
When I go back to it's just 2 issues, but it's Claremont and Byrne, that collaboration at the peak of its powers. It's a few issues before Byrne leaves the book. And when we think about what makes a future timeline story compelling, utterly readable, you have to reread it and brings in the pathos. I mean, look at that cover. And
everybody dies.
Yes, exactly. And the idea that a future timeline frees the creators to do things like kill off beloved characters, or put characters in situations you would never imagine, relationships you would never imagine. When I read this as a kid, I didn't read it when it came out. It was 1980, so I wasn't quite reading X-Men comics yet. I knew who they were, but I wasn't getting the book monthly yet. But so I read it probably a couple years later. One of the infinite number of trades it came out in. I think I read it. They did like a very thin, like 2-issue, like cardboard cover reprint of it at one point. I got that, and my jaw just hit the floor. I was probably like, I don't know, 12 or something like that, and they're all dead. Like just and Claremont had so established the personalities and the relationships of the characters. And I remember the scene that affected me the most was when Storm is killed and Colossus, he goes completely berserk. And Claremont writes about how he saw her as a sister, and I remember the phrase that he found her death unendurable. And then Kitty, or Rachel, because Rachel Summers is in the story, and she's in Colossus' head, and she thinks about how she's with him till he dies. They don't show him dying. She just says, "Oh, he's dead." And what's amazing about the story is all the X-Men are killed so quickly and so easily by these super futuristic Sentinels. It enhances the feeling of almost hopelessness for the readers. Like, how is this going to end? Because everybody's just dying. It was probably my first experience as a kid before I knew the word, to what dystopian stories are. And I still think, in terms of comics, it is one of the greatest dystopian stories ever put to page. And, it ends with the timeline is righted, or is it? And of course, it speaks to the strength of the source material. They've gotten so much mileage out of those 2 issues. I mean, think about all the Rachel Summers, her whole arc, all the other stories they've done in that world, the movie we've talked about. I think it's really the culmination of, that's another great cover, the culmination of the legendary Claremont Byrne Austin run. So that's my number 2.
And talk about a cover that's probably been
God,
replicated.
Replicated almost as much as that Crisis on Infinite Earths cover with Superman and Supergirl.
Yeah,
everybody's done a version of this cover at least once. Talk about an iconic image.
Between the Crisis cover with Superman holding Supergirl, this, and the Justice League #1 pose, those 3 covers are just replicated over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
And when we think about, obviously Claremont is a Star Trek fan, and we think about the great Star Trek episodes or anything in science fiction where you have these wonderful moments, these stories just really go to the essence of that whole concept. It's so well done.
Mirror universe.
There was a series that came out years and years and years later in the late 90s called Wolverine: Days of Future Past. It was a mini series that John Francis Moore wrote.
I don't think I've read that.
With Joe Bennett on pencils.
Oh, I love Joe Bennett.
And it fills in a gap from before Days of Future Past happened.
Interesting.
Involving Wolverine and Jubilee, Leech, Sync, and Magneto are all characters along with it. It's not great, but it's also it's fun to see these gaps filled in for timelines like that. And I think they did a pretty good job of it. That was in my heyday of buying everything Marvel.
Of course, we all had those moments.
Oh yeah.
And what's great also is that in the story they have Magneto in the wheelchair because Xavier is long dead, taking up the role, of course, as sort of the patriarch of everything.
Of course. Yep. Excellent. All right. Shane, go right ahead.
So my first experience with Alex Ross art was Marvels, and it was beautiful. It was amazing. And then to hear that he was going to do a story in DC, it was just an absolute no-brainer. Never did I realize it would be a story so distraught with the superheroes that were supposed to be great really being kind of jerks and overpowering what they should be doing, overstepping their bounds in this, I guess it would be dystopian future. I don't really know because it's just devastating. For what they do and pitting heroes and even family against each other, having rivals of Batman and Superman. It was just amazing to read as it came out. 4 issues long. Everybody knows it. So many people have read it, and if you haven't, you really should. This is another one of those seminal pieces of work. I think that if you really love DC Comics, especially, you should read this. And it's been adapted and woven into DC Comics history now since then in so many ways. Just a phenomenal piece of work, and gives interesting alternate futures for all the heroes that we love, and really how things can go so wrong, and how in the end they do bring it back together and do what's right, but it's not without so much devastation in between.
Yep.
It's just fantastic. I jumped on board when they made the audio drama. I even we had to drive up to, it was September of 1998. Carlene and I had to drive up to New York for a wedding, and I'm like, can I put this tape in and listen to it? She's like, yeah, sure. And it was the Kingdom Come saga, and she was bored out of her mind. But I loved it, and it was,
she demonstrated her love for you yet again.
Yeah, she sure did.
It's an arrow, a green arrow.
It was so much fun. But
don't they have Hawkman chirping in that?
Oh yeah.
Hey, I continue to say, and I'm still 99% certain that this is the case. I've mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. If you go on YouTube and you find the Kingdom Come audio drama that has been uploaded, I'm 99% certain that is from my recording of the audio, because I had the access to the tape. I literally connected a Walkman to my computer, and all that hiss is still in there, and it sounds like my hiss. So you're welcome, internet, for putting a copy of that.
I know I had. Well, before I had met you, Ian, I had a copy of it digitally, and I lost it somewhere. So then when you told me about that, not too terribly long ago, I re-downloaded that. So that's on my phone now for all posterity.
Somebody took the time and the effort to break it down into chapters too. So that's
a quick history lesson. So that is not available in like a new.
No.
Interesting.
It was only tape cassettes, and I have 2 copies of the tape cassettes.
What company produced it?
I'll have to look that up right now, but let's see.
That's interesting.
Kingdom Come
Audio, Time Warner Books.
There you go.
There's my 2 copies.
Nice.
They sit right on my shelf prominently. They're let's see, how is it? Come on, open up. There we go.
Wow.
Oh, look at those cassettes. That's never been reissued in a modern. Wow.
Nope. Not digitally, not CD, nothing.
Wow.
There's a bunch of those though. There's a bunch of those audio dramas that have only ever been on CD but never digitally, released, or audio cassette and never digitally released.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something worth listening to if you're so inclined. I like full audio dramas, so I was all into the graphic audio recordings and the Star Wars radio dramas from NPR back in the day.
Oh yeah,
all that stuff. I love old time radio shows anyway. But for a story, Kingdom Come was fantastic. DC did a sequel to it called The Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken.
Right around 1999.
And had a couple one-shots of different aspects of Kingdom Come, which didn't work.
Some of them were very good. And as a matter of fact, and I know Pants would back me up here, the Planet Krypton one-shot is one of the best comics either of us have ever read.
Yep.
By William
Kitson.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just fantastic.
Usually, I mean, there's still ways. Those are easily. I'm pretty sure that they're all digital, or that there've been trade paperbacks released with those other tie-ins comics as well.
And I even think during the JSA series that they brought in the future
Kingdom Come
Superman.
Yeah. Yeah, because the Kingdom Come reality is it's been folded into like one or more of the DC multiverses that have developed since Infinite Crisis. Earth 22, I think, is where the Kingdom Come story is supposed to happen now. So it's been established. It's not a part of the. It probably isn't a part of the mainstream DC reality's future, but it is a DC future, certainly.
Yep.
And the new, that new multiverse map that Mark Waid put together definitely has Kingdom Come Universe as one of the numbers.
Well, sure.
So it is still around. But what I remember is that JSA arc that you're mentioning, Shane, that had Alex Ross comic book art, not painted. It had Alex Ross. It was one of the few times you've ever seen Alex Ross just draw regular comic book art as opposed to painted on top of.
And he did some of the covers for that series too.
Oh yeah, quite a few.
And then he had those posters that were coming out like crazy too, the singular JSA characters.
And there is probably, I think of all these futures, I'll say there is not a more iconic costume that probably a decent amount of people probably think of next to the very Superman costume that we all know and love. That costume with that S logo ingrained in people's brains for a damn good reason, because it is so iconic.
Well, I loved when they brought it onto the, what was it, the Crisis crossover with Brandon Routh.
Yep.
Wearing it.
Right. That's right.
In the CW shows, which was awesome.
Yep.
I anytime they can tie in into that Kingdom Come world, it's fantastic.
Can see kind of an echo of the old Max Fleischer cartoon design.
Yes. Well put, Murd.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just it's a yeoman's job on Alex Ross's part as far as character design, because as Shane hinted at earlier, Alex Ross manages to throw just about every DC Comics character that's ever been even slightly significant into this story, and he extrapolates what that character's been through between the present and the Kingdom Come future. So there's a whole implied backstory in all these characters. And then he designed, on top of that, a whole bunch of new legacy bearer characters for a lot of these characters. And then he made up a whole bunch of other characters who were just completely original concepts. So, as great as the story is, it's a great dystopian tale of a superhero universe that's gone horribly wrong. And it's followed down that path to hell paved with good intentions we've all heard about. But a lot of the, for me at least, the real fun of reading this story is just kind of playing along and wishing for a scorecard, just to identify all these different characters. Now, who is that a future version of? Whose kid is that? And that's Tomorrow's, I think, somebody did put out a Kingdom Come companion.
It was done by Comixology.
Yes, Comixology, yeah.
And it was supposed to be something like something repeatedly that they would put out these grand tomes of information for various things, but they produced it, they solicited it. I have a copy.
Me too.
And then it was never produced again because I don't think they had the rights to do it, and they got in a lot of trouble for it, if I remember right.
Yep. So those copies of ours are probably worth a bit of money.
They were at one time.
I just found the cover, and holy cow!
Super Friends tribute.
Oh, I remember that. Wow.
Yep. And it does a fantastic breakdown of every character that even has the slightest appearance in the book.
Yep, I've often said if we were still doing footnotes episodes, Kingdom Come would be an ideal candidate, but Comixology kind of beat us to it.
Wow, they don't even have a copyright logo on the bottom there.
No, it's over on the other shelf, or else I'd go pull it real quick.
Yeah, this is something that I'm glad you guys have in your collection.
It was something that at one time, it does not, when I search eBay now, and I don't do it with the intent to sell my copy, but it used to come to garnish quite a pretty penny for quite a few years, and then it's kind of died down since then, but it's still a unique thing that is never to be represented again, that I can think of a reason how they would do it.
Yeah. Yep. Good choice. Recentering. Murd, you're number 2.
Okay. You may be noticing, looking at my list to this point, that I've been focusing a little more on, the shiny, hopeful, happy, utopian type futures than the gritty, bleak, dystopian ones. Now, Chris, I thought I knew Lazarus was going to be on your list, and I applaud you for it. I've read it. It's good work, but it's so damn depressing.
It is grim.
It's grim. Too good and too prophetic. And as you said, it's too reflective of a reality that's already emerging in real life. I mean, it's great ideas from Rucka and Lark, but it's just
it could happen.
I couldn't go too much further with it. But here we go. My number 2 is one that kind of splits the difference between shiny and hopeful and dystopian and disastrous. It's a DC Silver Age classic concept.
Is it ever?
It's hard to imagine a more classic Silver Age DC creative team. John Broome, writer, and Murphy Anderson, artist. The Atomic Knights. And this is a feature that ran in every third issue of Strange Adventures.
Wow.
From like 1960 through 1964. So right there in the heart of the Cold War. And here's my visual.
There's the hardcover, yep.
I'm sure Ian will notice the little green sticker here.
Oh, you bought that for me?
Yep, I got this from Chris's Wild Pig Comics half-price trade and hardcover shelf. So this is one of the few hardcovers I own, and gosh, it's worth it. And it collects all 15 of the Atomic Knights stories that ran in Strange Adventures back there in the 60s.
Or in Washington, 1990 AD.
Would you believe that's actually a different group of futuristic guys in knight's armor?
What?
I don't think that's even one of the stories. Yeah.
Would you believe?
Oh my God.
Yep. The Atomic Knights feature ran from Strange Adventures number 117 and then did every third issue through number 160, and they were only cover featured once.
Okay.
I'm flipping through the trade here to see if I can find which issue had them on the cover.
Interesting. All right. Well then, yeah, I guess there've been other nights. That's
Oop, I just saw it a minute ago. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Here we go. Strange Adventures number 144 is the only cover they were ever on back in the Silver Age.
All right.
Yeah. So the premise is it's 1986, which was the future back then, and we're on the other side of a 20-day long conflict known variously as World War III, the Great Atom War, the Hydrogen War, etc. The point is, radiation happened, and the Earth was terribly scarred. All plant life and all non-human animal life was completely eradicated. And in Land of Ooh fashion, all the atomic explosions actually reshaped the surface of the Earth itself. It reshaped continents and oceans, and it gave rise to bizarre new forms of life, such as the mole people, pictured on the cover of this issue. And also, eventually, about midway through the run of the Atomic Knights, we encountered there were actually some plant and animal specimens that were left alive.
And they're riding Dalmatians, by the way.
These gigantic atomic mutant Dalmatians. Yes, the dog Dalmatians, because they found the Atomic Knights encountered 2 large Dalmatians, which they then adopted as their private steeds. And so that's for the first several issues of this strip, they just kind of walked around, but then they acquired their Dalmatian steeds, and the image of knights in shining armor riding through a nuclear holocaust landscape on the backs of giant Dalmatians. It's kind of the main iconic image that people associate with the Atomic.
Murd, wasn't the armor somehow protect them from the irradiated surface?
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, Chris. Yes, in the very first appearance of the Knights, 2 men, one a soldier, one a schoolteacher, are fleeing from a maddened mob of starvation-maddened wrecks of human beings who are chasing them to get the can of sardines one of them was hiding in his jacket. And when they gave them the slip, but the mob tossed a radiation grenade after them. The 2 men dove behind a display of medieval suits of armor in an old museum, what remains of an old museum, and they discovered to their surprise that somehow these suits of armor, due to their advanced age, the strange alloys used in making them, and their exposure to radiation during the conflict, had rendered them radiation-proof. And so there were 6 suits of armor, one of them too small for an adult man to wear. So these 2 men took these suits, they rounded up a few other volunteers, and the school teacher's younger sister, who became the love interest for the leader of the Atomic Knights, Gardner Grail, she took the small one. And so their round table was set. 5 men, 1 woman, and 2 giant Dalmatians. And they began patrolling this landscape. Their headquarters was the midwestern city of Durvale. They began by defeating the Black Baron, which is like a local, like a feudal shogun or whatever you want to call him, who had hoarded all the food in the area. And they stormed his fortress in their ray gun-proof suits of medieval armor, and then they take his food and they feed the people. And they kind of established a little Camelot there in Durvale. And then they kind of ride around seeking human survivors to help and post-apocalyptic monsters to fight. They encounter mole people and alien scavengers and mutant cavemen. And at one point they visit New Orleans and get really into jazz.
Huh. Okay.
I'm not even kidding.
The Silver Age.
There is
Really
a story.
Silver
John
Age
Broome was never one to take his own writing too seriously. And he would just kind of, whatever. I don't give a crap. I'm going to slip in whatever I'm into right now into these kiddie comic stories I'm writing. So he has the Atomic Knights visit New Orleans, and they play "Oh When the Knights Are Marching In" as they enter the city. They find musical instruments, and they actually do that. They parade.
Oh my God!
Magnificent.
Yeah, it's just and Murphy Anderson's artwork is so crisp and clean and clear, and it's just great Silver Age science fiction. Yeah, it's silly kitty lit stuff, but it's hopeful and aspirational and all of that, and it shows that there's still room for justice and valor, even when all of civilization has crumbled beneath atomic explosions. Yep, there they are, the Knights.
Yep.
The Atomic
Well
Knights
done,
in
Ian.
New Orleans.
What I love about stories like that, like if you look at the popular culture of the 50s, early 60s, and I'm not making fun, but it's just fascinating how whether it was done to relieve people's fears or instead of ignorance, like people thought anybody would actually survive a nuclear holocaust or anything would actually be left standing. It's just fascinating to see.
And that they would somehow survive it wearing night suits.
Yeah.
Radiation-proof night suits.
Yep. Well done, Murd. Great selection.
Yeah. In the actual 1980s, when the real 1986 rolled around, in the late pre-crisis period, they tried to retcon the whole Atomic Knights reality as just like the main guy, Gardner Grail, was just a real soldier in present day who had been locked in a bunker in the Cold War, and all these crazy Atomic Knight stories were just simulations being fed into his head. I think that was established in an issue of DC Comics Presents somewhere along the way. But it's too great and too wacky a concept to be allowed to be retconned that way. So later multiversal maps of the DC multiverse have established that the Atomic Knights reality did in fact happen on some parallel Earth somewhere.
And all is well.
Nice.
Awesome.
Terrific. So silly. So silly.
Great selection, Murd. Great selection.
All right, one more DC for us to round out our number 2s, and that of course is DC 1.
He's got the omnibus cover up. Wow.
Yep. And this is something. This was right in the heart of me being into the JLA more than anything else. Grant Morrison, had a bunch of years there where they were just at the top of the DC echelon and could do whatever they wanted with the characters.
Rock of Ages, terrific.
This was a premise that was fascinating to me because it was just so far in the future. That this was taking place in, what was it, the 853rd century?
Indeed.
Yeah.
The year 85,271 to be precise, which, for those keeping score, was exactly 1 million months after the release of Action Comics #1.
Yep.
There
I remember that.
There you go. Yep. And yeah, that these Justice Leaguers come back and try to interact with, to them what was just legend essentially. In order to try and save their world and stop calamity. We eventually get, the big culmination of it. For those of you who haven't read it, it's not even like the main point of it, but just the fact that all these years later, 1 million months after Action Comics, that there still are Superman in one form or another is just kind of just mind-boggling. And the way that they pulled that off is just stellar. You got to read it to find out. That there's so many different iterations of the Justice Legion in this future. Justice Legion Alpha includes the main Superman of the 853rd century, a version of Wonder Woman, the Batman of Pluto. One of my favorite inclusions, John Fox, who is not from DC 1 million, but is still from the future. Was a part of Mark Waid's run of The Flash, and wound up in the 853rd century and stuck around. He's only from the 27th century, and got boosted in there. And of course, our favorite Android Hourman.
Indeed.
A series I still have to read. I know. It's a glaring omission on my part.
It's fantastic.
Shane, you had a direct Ted Knight descendant version of Starman.
Ferris Knight.
Yep, Ferris Knight. Resurrection Man. Resurrection Man in the 1 million series was one of my favorite characters, just because of how well they fleshed the character out, and how for somebody who resurrects over and over again, of course they're gonna be able to survive as long as they did. So that was its own thing. The Atom of the 853rd century, and also Owl Woman. Not much is known about Owl Woman, but she's Guardian anyway. And then on top of that, there were versions of Young Justice. There were versions of the Titans running around, and it crossed over into just about, if not every single title that was running at the time.
Sure.
Unfortunately, Chase's last issue was a 1 million issue.
Yeah.
That was the last one of that. But then, everything from Action Comics all the way down to Young Justice and everything in between. Young Heroes in Love had a 1 million, which goes to show you just how scoping it was. And just about all these are collected in the omnibus. If you want to check out everything, I owned at one point, I don't know if I still do, every single tie-in of 1 million that I bought off eBay at one point, just to have everything and be able to read everything.
I think I still have every issue of that crossover in my collection.
Yeah. And Kronos was another big 1 million crossover, as well, as that was a big series at the time that was nearing its conclusion. But overall, it was a well thought out, well fleshed out world that they visited every now and then since then. But the actual DC 1 million event was enough to blow my mind as a kid, and I still love it to this day. So.
And I know we've talked about it many times before, but that Hourman series, it's only 20 some issues, but boy, it's fantastic.
Yeah, my next trip to Eyes, I just got to buy the whole thing and read it. It's never been reprinted in a trade, right? No, I don't think it has.
If it was a long time ago.
There may have, don't quote me on that, there may have been a more recent one, but I might actually be thinking of Aztec that got republished recently.
Aztec, wow.
Yeah, because they've been doing every now and then reprints of it. Is it on the Infinite app?
Let me check.
I would think it would be, because it's not like it's a hard to think of series, and it was well regarded at the time. But just look at this splash page that just shows what a decent, what the 1 million characters looked like, and love it, absolutely love it.
Well done, Ian.
Yep. And now we be at our number ones. And Murd, I believe you're going to go first.
Okay. Well, we knew we'd have to get here sometime. So, the 30th century of Earth 247, colloquially known as the Reboot Legion.
Excellent. Love it. Shane?
I love his agony.
I'm gonna go with The Golden Age by James Robinson.
Oh, that's a good one.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to, would that be considered future?
Well, and if it's not, tell me, because my simpler answer was The Dark Knight Returns.
That's my number one.
Well, there we go. Shared number one.
Okay, do that.
Yeah,
because I wasn't sure if the Golden Age would qualify for that.
My criterion is that it has to take place sometime in future, beyond in time when it's published.
Okay.
All right. Well, then, since Dark Knight Returns is taken, I am going to go with a favorite of mine that is just literally one issue. Hulk the End.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, kind of surprised Future Imperfect didn't make anybody's list.
That's on my alternate list. I hemmed and hawed about that for my number 3 and number 2.
I was quite literally going between one or the other with this one, Murd, and I think Hulk the End matters to me a little bit more. So, yep. All right, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, we needed to have some kind of 30th century in here. And the reason I chose this iteration of the 30th century is admittedly pure nostalgia. I mean, it's, ask any Legion fan, this is not the favorite version of the Legion of most people, you might ask. But it is what got me involved in Legion lore. It was my intro. It was my gateway. It did for me exactly what DC wanted the Legion reboot that they enacted in the wake of Zero Hour to do. The Legion, its future reality had gotten kind of badly convoluted by the beginning of the 90s. I mean, they had the whole delayed complications from Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Boone rebooting of Superman and the removal of Superboy from the equation. And then they did the 5 years later time jump, and then they tried to recapture some of the youthful innocence of the original Legion concept by introducing the teenage clones of the Legionnaires. It had all gotten kind of messy. I can remember when I was trying to get into comics in the early 90s, 1992 and thereafter, I would look at the direct currents newsletters that DC was publishing in those days, and they would give them out.
I love those.
Yes, me too, Shane. I mean, I wasn't even reading DC Comics very much in those days yet, but that was what encouraged me to try little by little to get into DC, and then Zero Hour kind of sealed the deal. But I remember looking at those direct currents newsletters and saying, I'd like to try almost all of this, except these Legion things. They just sound too confusing and too soap opera, and so it had gotten kind of stagnant and and tangled and fractious, and I just couldn't do it. But then Zero Hour happened. And courtesy of architect Mark Waid, it wouldn't be the last time he would helm a reboot of the Legion in their future world. And Tom Pyre, with a healthy scripting assist from Tom McCraw, who also colored the Legion ongoing books, and with some great clean, colorful artwork from artists like Lee Moder and Philip and Jeffrey Moy. It gave us a new, fresh take on the Legion of Superheroes characters, and it kind of revamped their entire future timeline, and it just let them start from scratch and let readers start from scratch with them. And it was just what I needed as a reader at the time, and I still, to this day, consider it my Legion. And I can remember one of our super shows when the Legion of Substitute Podcasters, our friends Darren and Paul, and among others, they drew me aside and they wanted me to do a guest appearance on their podcast. And they asked me how I got into the Legion. And I told them, would you hate me if I said 0 hour? And I could feel the air grow a little colder between the No, that's okay. Yeah, longtime Legion readers will probably prefer the classic iteration of the Legion, that which existed between the late 50s and all the way through 0 Hour, or at least through the mid 80s. The Paul Levitz, Great Darkness era, like that. The things got a little bit strange towards the end of the 80s, and during the Giffen and Tom and Mary Bierbaum era. So I think there are some Legion fans who would agree with me that was not the best time, but a lot of those Legion fans would also probably say the 0 Hour reboot was not necessary to get the ship back on track. But I just mixed a metaphor terribly there. To get the train back on track. But yeah, there we go. Thank you, Ian, because that was a pull-out poster. That was published in Legionnaires number 50, I believe. It's Alan Davis artwork,
Sure is.
and I had that poster hanging on my dorm room in Penn State, right above my bed for the 2 years that I lived in the university housing. Yeah, and it went with me to grad school. I hung it up on the wall of my office there as a grad student. So it's the whole cast of characters, as of when Legionnaires number 50 was published for 1998 or 99. And it's the revised versions of the classic Legion characters. They were given new costumes, new names, some of which dated back to the pre-Legion reboot teenage clones of the Legionnaires. And they also introduced, the creators introduced a bunch of new Legionnaires that were kind of unique to this period of Legion history, and I don't think have been seen since. Like, for example, up there in the back left-hand corner, that's Monstrous, the big green-skinned one. She was a wealthy heiress and society debutante who also happened to have the power of a Hulk.
Okay.
And the manners of Emily Post. And in the foreground there, in the lower left, is Gates. You know, the little centipoid guy with the squid beak and the red hood. He was a teleporter, and he was also a grouchy Marxist who was always grumbling about how his planet's government had forced him to join this team of capitalist drones. Yeah, that's Tom Pyre, who was, along with Mark Waid, was one of those who got this off the ground. We've often mentioned him as one of the underrated writers of comics of recent decades, and he's also the writer of the Hour Man series that Shane and I are always touting every chance we get. And what they did with this take on the Legion and their version of the 30th century and the United Planets and all of that, it's squeaky clean, and it's hopeful, and it's all ages friendly, and all of that earned it the contemptuous nickname among certain fans as the Archie Legion, which is not a term you will ever hear me use, ever. Yeah. No, it is the post-Zero Hour Legion or the Reboot Legion or Earth 247 Legion, because it was eventually established that this version of the Legion was kind of yanked in from the now defunct parallel Earth of Earth 247 and pasted in place of the no longer viable pre-Zero Hour Legion timeline. And so it too probably exists somewhere in the current DC multiverse if anyone ever cares to visit it, which doesn't seem likely at this point. We're barely seeing any version of the Legion these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, this will always have a very strong soft spot in my heart. It's what opened up the entire world of Legion of superhero storytelling in all its iterations to me. As after getting to know the Legion in this form, I did ultimately travel, sample some stories from the Silver and Bronze Ages, and now I consider myself a fan of all versions of the Legion. But this was the gateway, and this is one of the first comic book alternate futures I explored in any great detail. So, yep, I place it right there atop my list for that reason.
Out of curiosity, who's the Shazam character in this pinup?
She calls herself Thunder. Her name is Cece Beck. She was introduced in another future timeline thing we might have put on our list here, though. There's Legends of the Dead Earth annuals that DC did.
Oh, right.
Circa 1996, I want to say. And that was when Power of Shazam by Ordway and Company was running. And so she was introduced in the Legends of the Dead Earth annual, and she, similar to John Fox in the Justice Legion A, she was not a native of the time period shown here. She was actually from further in the future than the 30th century, but she got trapped back in time in the 30th century and ended up joining the Legion while she was there.
Nice. Two things I'll mention. One, in the later days of this reboot Legion, Abnett and Lanning had a lot to do with what was going on over there.
Right, yeah. The Legion of the Damned and the Blight storyline. Yeah, Legion Lost.
Yep, and that basically was right before they took over the cosmic stuff over at Marvel, and then
yes, it was, yeah.
It created Guardians of the Galaxy and made that into what it was. But I came damn close to putting the 3-boot on my list. In fact, it's actually very high on my alternates. So I'm glad you mentioned the reboot, because I enjoyed the reboot, but I got in on that tail end on the Abnett and Lanning, and then when Kitson and Wade made their own Legion reboot, I was really, really into that for a long period of time until Jim Shooter came on the book and it went entirely off the rails. But great Maniple art. Jim Shooter did not know what he was doing otherwise.
Shooter began his career in the 60s as a kid writing Legion.
Right,
stories.
he was a 13-year-old kid, and he wrote into Mort Weisinger, and he got himself a job scripting Legion of Superheroes stories.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. That stuff is great for what it is. I still wish he'd stayed away from Wade's version of the Legion. They were competing styles. They were competing styles, definitely.
Yeah, I think the what Murd's talking about right through the Abnett and Lanning stuff, I loved. I thought it was fantastic. Legion superhero stories.
Absolutely. And Connell was running around with them for a decent amount of time. the Superboy that I love, the clone Superboy was a part of that Legion for a decent amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they were stranded in the 20th century for a decent chunk of time, and I guess they met Connell then, and eventually he ended up coming to the few. I think it was during the Abnett and Lanning Legion run, actually.
Yep.
And then from go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, and for that matter, Spider-Boy, the amalgam character. Had his own Legion where they basically crossed that over, and it was like Spider-Boy and the Spider Legion or something like that.
Legion of Galactic Guardians or something.
I think so. Yeah. Yep. And that was a lot of fun.
But ever since reading that span of Legion, I usually give every iteration that comes after a try to see if it can capture something for me again. And sometimes it does. Most times it doesn't.
Yep.
Now it's like Adam said, it's been a big pause now. We're hardly seeing anything.
Yeah, Bendis took his shot. It doesn't seem to have caught on too much.
No.
Well, I'm sure once Johns is done with JSA, he'll probably be like, "Hey, I'm back on Legion. Let's do Legion." If there's one thing Johns loves just about as much as the JSA, it's the Legion. So you never know.
Right, you are.
Mm-hmm. All right, now for some book that nobody's ever heard of, The Dark Knight Returns. So, Chris and Shane, it's all...
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I'm honored, my friend. This is my easiest selection. I'm sure most listeners have read Dark Knight Returns, are familiar with it. I think... So it came out in 1986. I was 13? Yes. And I didn't read it in the monthly format. I read it in one of the many trades that came out very quickly, because the book was an immediate sensation.
Yeah.
And I think for me at that point in my life, my exposure to Batman was the 60s show, Super Friends, and a smattering of various Batman comics. So as a 13-year-old kid, this blew my mind. Mm-hmm. And again, it was one of my earliest exposures to the idea of a dystopian story. And to this, I'd say I read it maybe once a year or so. And it's interesting because as an adult, you look at it now, and I still love it as much as ever, but it's interesting because I'm like, is there kind of like a fascism subtext here that's kind of going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you think about some of Miller's later work, like that whole post 9/11 thing he did, which didn't appeal to me, but that just only adds to my enjoyment of the story because there's so much going on in it. But when I think back to, as a 13-year-old kid, and I read it constantly after that as I grew up, what affected me the most is that, for me, it established the idea of Batman as myth.
Yeah.
And to this day, when I read this story, there are still scenes that actually give me literal chills.
Mm-hmm.
Because Miller and Klaus Janson, involved the whole creative team, there's so many moments in this story because you know all the characters, you know the world, you know everything he's referring to when he, like Commissioner Gordon talking about his weariness as he retires, and you see the various villains in their various states of decrepitude. You see what's happened to Gotham City because Batman is vanished, essentially, is retired. Yeah. And I always go back to that one of those early scenes where a disgruntled, let's say, 50-year-old Bruce Wayne. It's funny to know because I'm now 50 myself.
Right. Let's not scare each other.
Yeah. Is walking through the city with his hands shoved in his pockets.
Yep.
And you see this tramp kind of running the streets, his face like this chasm of decay. And he's holding this placard shouting out, "We are damned."
Yeah.
And from that moment forward, everything that happens in that book, we could spend hours talking about different scenes that still have this incredible impact on me. There's one scene especially that I always go back to, is when the Joker has murdered all of these Boy Scouts at the carnival. And in the animated film, which I thought was very well done with Peter Weller, when they did that 2-part, they kind of downplayed that scene because it's so horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember, as Batman is approaching from the air with the new Robin by his side, and she's never experienced what the Joker really does. And it's again, the narration, Bruce's narration of the story is riveting. And he's describing how this child is just horrified at her breath intakes. And he's basically saying to himself, this is all my fault. And he's saying in so many words, and paraphrasing, this ends tonight, Joker. And also the other thing I know Murd may not be a fan of this, but the portrayal of Superman in this story, I can see
I'm right there with him.
It's a very compromised version of Superman, cast in the role of like a essentially an enforcer for a totally compromised, very 1980s take on the United States government.
Yeah,
and of course a eternal Ronald Reagan type figure. I mean, the other thing that I love about the story when you read it out, it is so couched in the 1980s.
Oh yeah, it's dated.
When we think about the 1980s obsession with vigilantism, with Central American politics, with proxy wars in the third world and all of that. I mean, the Soviet Union is very much in this story, etc. But when the way he portrays Superman, which of course there's problems there, depending on how you look at it, but the scene where Superman is withering away and he's calling out to the sun, almost like as a god to restore him. I think that scene is epic. And the lightning coursing through. Like I think it is some of the greatest artwork of Miller's career.
Oh, definitely.
And it's still a story that speaks to me on so many levels. And like I said, as an adult now, there's troubling stuff going on in this book. And when you think about where Miller goes on later on in his career, the themes are very interesting, and it doesn't diminish mine. I still revere this story, but it's like Shane said, there's elements of it that are dated, that are aged. And I approach it now in kind of a different way as a middle-aged man. But I got to tell you, like, look at this scene, like Alfred talking about the wing china shattering as he blows up the whole mansion. Then he goes, how proper. And he just drops dead right there. Like, it's mythology. Like this story very much for me is just, it's the mythology of a Batman that is in the future, who in many ways is a very compromised and fallen figure. But it still works for me on every level. And when I think about future timelines, to me, this is still like this is
pinnacle.
This is the paradigm for me. Shane, go ahead.
So I can distinctly remember exactly where I first saw this book. It was in the little cardboard standee that some stores had had maybe a dozen issues into it.
Yep.
It was in the centerpiece in the comic store I was going to, which was called Turks. It was in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. TURK''S. I could still go there. The store, of course, is not there, but the store front is still there. I could drive right by it today if I wanted to.
Yeah.
I can distinctly remember seeing issue 1 and going, no, that doesn't look good. And then passing on issue 2, and then issue 3's cover with the large bat symbol on it made me pause and kind of look at it. And by that time, I had known the owner a little bit. He knew that I was getting a lot of DC books, and he said, "You haven't picked that up yet?" And I'm like, No. He said, "You really should. It's really good." I picked up issue 3. He had, I think, issue 2. I had to seek out issue 1, and I found that at another store or a convention at some point. And then got issue 4, and then I read them all together. And that first time, it was okay. But as I would look at it again and again, because I didn't have a lot of comics back then, it was only a couple hundred back then. And I would page through it, and then I would reread it, and then I would put it down, and then I'd reread it. And I reread it a few times in the first couple of years, over and over during the year. I really started to appreciate it and really started to like the art, which I did not like at first. That's why I passed on the first 2 issues, because I thought, what is with this? This looks too weird. But my love of Batman and the story and talking to the owner of the store and some other people that would come in and out, I really grew for an appreciation for the story and really learned to love it. And just
look at Varley's color work.
Yeah, just loved it ever since. It's a fantastic story. I've read every sequel to it. The second one was not my favorite, but I've liked all the other ones much more than I thought I would. But the first one still, there's just something so special about it.
I think when I read it today, the part of the book that works the best for me is Jim Gordon's narrative.
Yes,
because he is an old, exhausted veteran. He's trying to give up smoking. He's with Essen, who was the character we know him from Batman Year One, who's his wife at this point. And just his weariness as he's trying to navigate. It's almost like the Tommy Lee Jones character, No Country for Old Men. He's like, what is like this street gang? Like he can't really deal with what crime has become in this city. And the scene, it's just great action when Batman takes on the mutant leader for the last time and he goes, "This is an operating table." And the surgeon. It's so 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
It's such that sheer vigilantism, but the art is so phenomenal. And when he just basically dismantles the mutant leader's bones in that mud hole, it's the essence of just dystopian 1980s comics. But this is a great page that Ian just put up there as well. But Gordon's arc in the book, I think, is what actually stands up the best for me as I read it today. In
the early part of this book here, isn't it where Jim says, about how he used to drink ginger ale? Doesn't he know in this in the beginning?
Does he know? Oh yeah, they get together for a drink.
Because of it.
Yeah, and he's like, he tells Bruce, you just need a woman, and he hits his arm, and Bruce is thinking, the creature churns inside me, and I know what I need, like that type of narrative.
There's the whole scene that happens after this at some point, not too far after, where Bruce is talking and then shaving, and all of a sudden he comes up clean shaven, and Alfred's like,
what happened to your beard?
Yeah.
No, there are like, again, Miller just really captures like it again in this very dark future, the myth of Batman, the bat, the symbolism of the bat, all of that. And that of course clashes with this really horrifying world.
Yeah.
Like when the Joker goes on the Dr. Ruth analog and that whole thing, and and she's screaming about sex and and like it's the story in many ways is almost like a very right-wing reactionary take on what's happening in our country
right
at that time. It's a fascinating, like as a timepiece, it's a fascinating comic.
Which is also why it made so much sense to have Peter Weller voice Batman.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
In the animated.
Oh yeah.
Inspired casting. Yes.
Nothing more 80s than RoboCop. I mean,
but I also liked when Michael Ironside did it in Batman the Animated Series or Batman Adventure, whatever one episode he did it in. That wasn't too bad either. But I definitely like Peter Weller better.
And there's one other. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please, by all means.
One other great moment, I think, that also captures the essence of why the story still works for me so effectively, is at the climactic battle where Batman's leading all like the gangs into the streets. He's on the horseback, like he's Clint Eastwood, basically. And the new police commissioner, I think her name is Yinsen or Yindel, something like that. She wants to intervene, and Gordon just goes, Gordon had told her earlier on, like, he's really too big. And at this point, she just goes, the police, like, should we get involved? She goes, no. He's just too big. Not his size, but the myth, the stature. And that's, I think, what is most compelling about the story for me to this day.
Yeah. I want to say right here, if you're watching, there's Batman, Robin, and Superman from McFarlane Toys. Maybe that's Batman, Robin, and Superman.
Yeah.
You nailed it with your finger. Well done.
I wasn't going to get them. And then I got them on clearance. So that was good.
But and the Joker is terrifying.
Oh yeah,
in this story, he's
just
terrifying.
And as you read it, he really needs to be ended.
Yes.
Oh,
but even in that scene, he's still carrying out like this romance he has with Batman. Like, it's good stuff.
I'd say that everything that comics are today, for better and for worse.
Yep. Grim and gritty, baby. Grim and gritty.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Because, at the time, people still thought of Batman 66 when they thought of Batman.
Yep.
And this very much turned the table, turned the chains a little bit, and was like, oh, yeah, Batman can kick ass.
And Shane, wasn't this a big influence on the Keaton film?
Oh, yeah. It was this, and then Year One, and then the Keaton film, which was influenced by both of those. And that was it. For Batman Dark Knight Returns and then Batman Year One, they were massive departures from what everybody thought of
Absolutely.
of Batman.
Yep. No question about it. All right.
Good team up, Shane. Good team up.
Thank you.
Dynamic duo here.
So my choice of Hulk the End, it's only a one shot, and it usually gets included with the Hulk Future Imperfect when they collect it in trade.
Yep.
For that very reason, just because it's another future Hulk story and everything. But the artwork is absolutely tremendous. Dale Keown on the artwork with Peter David on story, and there are a few stories that I feel like get to the heart of the problem that is the Hulk. Because at this point, the world is dead. There's no humans left. There's very little of anything left.
But there is always Hulk.
But there's always Hulk. And there are times in this story where Hulk tries to commit suicide, that Bruce tries to commit suicide to end it all, but the Hulk won't let it happen. Even though, while at the same time, Hulk just keeps saying what he always says. Why won't they leave Hulk alone? But nobody's left but the Hulk at this point. At one point, the Shi'ar and a couple of other, alien races come down to watch the end of humanity. And think of that. The end of humanity is the Hulk at this point. And it does happen eventually. The Hulk gives out because even the Hulk can't last forever. But it's such a simple yet refined story that stands alone, doesn't need anything else, and presents us with the bleakest possible future of nothing left. And yet, it's a perfect Hulk story. And for that reason, it had to be on my list, and I'm damn happy to have it as my number one because there are a few stories that have gotten to the heart of a character better than this. It's one of Peter David's best written issues of a comic, and I adore it.
And what's especially powerful, and as you to piggyback on your point, is that the last vestige of humanity is the rage. It's the horror. It's the of Bruce Wayne, Bruce Banner's psyche. As captured in this behemoth. Oh, fantastic.
And this one page that I was looking for, which I just found here, the one page where Bruce comes to, what's essentially a hero park and finds the statues of all of his fallen friends. And yet, I'll be damned, it's still here. And so is he. So this is just a reminder of all that the human race has lost, that he's lost. Hulk still stands. And yeah, you can't get more poignant than that. So
good pick, buddy.
Yep, indeed.
Great lists all around, gentlemen. I think this was a great job. Obviously alternates will be had, and alternates sure will be had. So
you mind if I go first? Because I got to go to bed, man.
Yeah, Chris, by all
go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Teaching duties. Mine is very, very short. And actually, I want to ask you guys, for your judgment again.
Mm-hmm.
Is Avengers Forever a future story?
Yes and no.
It's an everything story.
Okay, so because I was hovering on my main list. I wasn't sure. Yeah. It's a masterpiece. Rest in peace, Carlos Pacheco.
Yes.
Definitely one of my alternates. My alternates is very short because I couldn't think of a lot. The other one I wanted to mention, which I just read, and let me tell you something. This is already, I think, going to be a classic. Catwoman: The Lonely City. Holy crap.
Oh, I didn't read that yet.
Holy crap.
Yep.
Wow.
Just reminded me I still need to place an order for that.
I'll talk about it more when we have our next comic talk, but I don't want to spoil because you guys haven't read it yet, but it is a Cliff Chang, man, because it's his work. He did everything in the story.
Uh-huh.
It is a magnificent take on a future Gotham City and a very middle-aged Selena Kyle. I won't say any more, but it's so there's some hope in this story. It's not all typical grim and gritty Elseworld type story, but there's stuff that's happened that's in that category. But in the end, it's really about her and her struggle with her past and how she's going to try to resolve that as she moves into the future, and that's all I'll say. But it is this. I already consider this a masterpiece, quite frankly. And when we talk about one creator's vision, this school is in, boy. This is good stuff. So, gentlemen, I apologize. I still got to walk the dog, and then I got to get up and.
By all means,
if you call it, educate some of our teenage youth. So, gentlemen, it has been an honor.
So until next time, sir.
You bet.
Good night.
Talk to you soon. Good night.
All right. Good night. Alrighty. I'm just gonna throw my alternates out there real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Shane, and then Murd, you can read yours after that. 3-Boot Legion, as I previously said, is on my list. I had Future Imperfect just barely off the list and chose Hulk the End instead. The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, right.
I forgot about that.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
It's been on my mind lately, and it's such a unique story with Cyclops and Phoenix thrust into the future to raise what is essentially their son, even if Jean didn't give birth. Madeline did, close enough.
Yeah.
Of Nathan Christopher as he's being raised by the Ascani in that future storyline. Great stuff. Absolutely love it. Days of Future Past is on mine. Bishop's Future and all the connotations of that. And for that matter, also the Cable series, the one that takes place almost entirely in the future with baby Hope Summers, strapped to him and all that jazz.
Okay, that one, yeah.
Yeah, it had its bumps, but it was still unique enough. There's a lot of futures with the X-Men involved.
Indeed, there are.
Batman issue 666 with Damian's Dark Future. With Damian, made my list there. Titans Tomorrow with the dark take on the Titans from Jeff Johns' run on the Teen Titans. Titans Scissor Paper Stone.
By Adam Warren.
Yep, by Adam Warren. Love that one shot, and it's a really cool, unique version of the future. Scud the Disposable Assassin.
Okay.
Goes on my list as well, because that sure as heck is a future, and it's a weird one, and I adore it for what it is.
Great.
Old Man Logan on the list.
I thought of that. Yeah.
It's mattered a lot, and we wouldn't have the Logan movie without it. So
I've actually never read it.
Give it a read at some point. It's got its creepy, weird moments, but overall, I think it's a pretty good production, all things considered. And I just had one on the tip of my tongue, and it slipped away again. So clear. Oh yes, J. Michael Straczynski's Future Spider-Man, the one with the jacket. We don't get to see a lot of that Spider-Man, like the one where he's on the run from the police. And clearly he did something wrong, and that's really all we know about it. But that design is so damn cool. I think of that as like, if I'm going to have a future Spider-Man design that's Peter Parker, that's what I want as my Spider-Man. And I'll end it there, because I at this point I'd be rambling. So yes. Shane?
All right. I had this would have been a major cheat because it's just easy. I had Star Trek and all the mirror universe stuff in Star Trek comics lately, just because it takes place, a couple hundred years away.
Fair enough.
Okay. I did have Spider-Girl. I did have DC 1 million. I had the White Knight series. I did just generalize Legion of Superheroes because, again, everything takes place ahead. I had Future Imperfect. I did have Booster Gold just because he's from the future, but not really doing anything out there. He comes back to us. Did have Days of Future Past. I did also have, where is it? I was debating about Age of Apocalypse, but decided that was totally alternate, not future.
Right, that's an alternate present.
Yeah, so I kiboshed that. And there was something else I just thought of, and I wanted to write it down. It was something Ian said, son of a gun.
Oh, well, you know what? While you're mentioning Booster Gold, what about Justice League 3000?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
really
absolutely. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Yeah, Justice League 3000 would have been great. Gosh darn it. What were you talking about a minute ago?
X-Men and having 87 futures. JMS's Spider-Man.
Nope, it's totally out of my head. Son of a bitch.
Titan, scissor, paper, stone.
Nope.
All right.
Oh, nope, it's gone. I'll think about it. If I think about it, I'll say it because it was really good in my mind.
Okay.
It'll find its way back to you, Shane.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. All right. Well, while Shane tries to think of it, Murd, go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it's not my longest list of alternates either, but it's long enough. Sitting right at the top of it is 2099, all of it, because those were coming out when I was just getting into comics, and they were a really cool thing that was happening in comics at that time.
Yep.
Like I tried all of them, but I agree with Shane that Spider-Man and Doom were the best. I've got, in addition to the reboot Legion, which was at the top of my list, I've also got the classic pre-Zero Hour 30th Century and the 3-boot 30th Century. I mean, it's not my favorite version of the Legion. I didn't like everything that Wade did with the characters, but just in terms of world building, establishing this 30th century as kind of this staid, stuffy, stagnant world that has known nothing but centuries of peace and stability, and the teenagers are so sick of it they could scream, and that all just kind of explodes into a version of the Legion that's more a youth movement than a team. It was just a cool idea. I've got the 64th century, home to the Flash villain Abracadabra.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
The Clark point has been reached and science and technology are indistinguishable. It's kind of a tough town for an aspiring young stage magician like Abra, which is why he had to come back in time to pester people with his tricks. I've got Kirby's Great Disaster, home of Commandy. Now, for reasons already stated, it probably would have made my list if the Land of Ooh had not been even more fun. Mm-hmm. I've got Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century.
Oh, that's a good one.
Thank you, eager young space cadet. Sorry Chris isn't here to hear this one. The year of the city 2276, when Logan's Run takes place.
Okay.
As Marvel did do a comics adaptation for several
Sure
issues
did.
with George Perez artwork. So that's something to seek out if you're a Perez fan. It's not easy to come by, though.
No.
I did have the 853rd century of DC 1 million. That's in there. And speaking of the Our Man Android series that we all love so much, in issue number 17, we're introduced to the Our Man Century, which is a far future period of 100 years of human culture dedicated entirely to paying tribute to the Time Stream's greatest champion. And it becomes kind of like a secret headquarters for the android Our Man, his century of solitude, if you will. On his first visit there in Our Man number 17, he actually asks which century it is numerically, and the young woman who's acting as his tour guide says, "We don't know." We gave up numbers for themes eons ago. So,
and that entire series is on Infinite online.
Okay.
Good. So you've got another reading assignment there, folks. If you're a fan of DC history, and especially like Justice League centric DC history, you should try reading Our Man if you never have.
Nice.
Okay. I've got the 30th century of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, like the original Guardians of the Galaxy. I've got the year 4000 AD, home to the classic Gold Key and Valiant hero Magnus Robot Fighter.
Nice.
4000 AD from Russ Manning. Let's see. I've got Kingdom Come on here, certainly. One thing I'm surprised nobody mentioned, what I like to call Divine Comedy X. Earth X, Universe X, Paradise X.
I had never read any of those.
I've read them all, and I completely forgot to mention them, so I'm glad you mentioned them. Well done.
It's pretty good stuff, Shane. I don't think you'll like it as much as Kingdom Come, but I don't think it's as good as Kingdom Come, but especially Earth X. It does an interesting job of weaving together a whole bunch of different disparate Marvel Universe characters and ideas and just threads that probably were never intended to be woven together by various Marvel creators over the years, and it turns them into a coherent narrative. And it's
even if I tried, I gave up.
I can't blame you. After Earth, when it gets into like Universe and Paradise, it starts to collapse under the weight of its own ideas a little bit. It gets a little bit too convoluted. It tries to do too much. But Earth X, at least, is pretty darn solid. Let's see what else I got here. I'm almost to the end of the list already. I've got an artifact of the Bronze Age, the twin future dystopias of Machus and Femizonia, which are future worlds divided along gender lines. In Machus, men have risen to dominance and have enslaved and oppressed women, and in Femizonia, women have come to dominance and have oppressed and enslaved mankind and slaughtered most of them. The character Thundra actually originated from the Femizonia timeline.
Okay.
And she and a representative from Machus, Machismo, the nuclear man, came back in time and duked it out in the 20th century. Thundra came back on a mission to humiliate the world's most powerful man to try to prevent Machus from ever coming to being. And the Fantastic Four get involved, and thanks to some accidental meddling by the FF, these two future worlds end up merging into one far more pleasant timeline where the two genders live together in harmony. But it's just a nice artifact of ham-handed Bronze Age attempts at social commentary and addressing issues of the growing gender divide in society and second wave feminism and all of that.
And see, all I come back to is that Futurama episode with the snoo.
Oh, right. Amazon Women in the Mood, right?
Oh, yeah.
And B. Arthur as the computer.
Right, the femputer, right.
Computer.
And that's basically what Thundra had on her mind. Once that happened and Femizonia and Machus merged and her work was done, she stuck around in the 20th century just trying to snoo the most powerful men she could get her hands on. She went after the Thing for a while. She was with Hyperion for a bit, And last but not least, this is the quintessential Murdonian deep cut here. This is an alternate future that was seen only once in a single 7-page backup story in 1967 in an issue of Charlton's Peter Cannon Thunderbolt.
Nice.
I'm sorry Chris isn't here to at this, but yes, this is Ultrapolis, the Orwellian future fascistic nightmare city that was the setting for a character called the Prankster. In his one and only appearance, he was written by Denny O'Neil with art by a young Jim Aparo.
Wow.
This place, it's Orwell by way of Hanna-Barbera. It's practically Saturday morning cartoon worthy, but it's a silly take on a fascist dystopia. It's a world where, quote, love, laughter, art, all those things that afford dignity to human existence have all been outlawed in this place. And there it is. You are just endlessly resourcewful, Ian.
I try, my friend.
Every time you impress the hell out of me. Thank you so much. So there it is, Ultrapolis, a city which may never exist, but if it does, it will be a place ruled by brute force, where love, laughter, music, art, every expression of human dignity can be a crime punishable by death. Where one man uses mankind's most ancient weapons, wit, humor, and courage, to combat overwhelming evil. His name, the Prankster.
Wow.
And just look at that costume. It looks more like the Super Friends version of Toy Man than anything else.
A little bit.
And then he's got like a bag of tricks, like gimmicked yo-yos and things that he uses to battle, the jackbooted goons that patrol Ultrapolis.
Toy Man meets 3D Man, actually.
Yeah,
that's what he reminds me of.
Yeah, it's the eye holes in the mask, I think, that make that.
Yep.
And he behaves a little bit like Spider-Man in that he uses wit and humor to battle these glorified thugs that patrol this futuristic world and the city that he lives in and is trying to liberate. And it's ruled by a guy named Bane, who is romantically attached to his master computer, who looks a little bit like Rosie the maid from the Jetsons. Yeah, so it has real promise. This thing. It was introduced as just a single 7-page backup story in what I think was the last issue of Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. It never got a chance to blossom beyond that. But it's the Earth 4 character that I wish that could have moved beyond somewhere. Could have been picked up by DC and done something with once they acquired the Charlton Library of Action Heroes.
Yeah.
But I first learned about it when I was researching my undergrad thesis. Mm-hmm. It's O'Neill and Aparo, and it's a trickster hero, and it's just an epically ugly costume, and it's always one of the great missed opportunities, of the late Silver Age in my mind, in this fan's opinion.
Nice.
Well, Grant Morrison, if you're out there, there's a character that might be right up your alley that you probably never heard of that appeared for 7 pages that you're waiting to read. Fantastic. One, actually 2 or 3 more that I'll throw out there. Commandy.
Sure, the Great Disaster. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, got to throw that man out there as he's literally the last one. And darn it, I just had another one on top of my head too, and that just went out the window. So
I remembered mine.
oh,
Good.
good.
And I'm thinking because of when it came out, it would be futuristic. It may not be anymore, but it was the Son of Demon trilogy of graphic novels
Oh, okay.
for Batman's future son that really wasn't part of history until years and years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair. That at the time it was future, and now it's retroactive past.
Yeah.
So
That's comics for you.
exactly. You never know what anything that's published could eventually wind up being.
Oh, sure.
Yep. All right, I think that's that, gentlemen. Job well done all around. Plenty of good stuff. Oh, you know what? I remember what I was going to say. And this one is just for Deemer and Jamie. DMZ.
Right. All right.
You know, I thought of that while Chris was talking about Lazarus, but thank you, Ian, for slipping that in there.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
One of the great CGS debates of all time.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Go in the archives if you don't know what we're talking about. It is gold, baby.
Yeah, it's gold.
We used to sell buttons to people at conventions. Whose side are you on? I heart DMZ, anti-DMZ.
If it wouldn't cause things to fall, I'd pull. I still have the frame with every button we've ever made in it, sitting right here at the desk, and it's up there. I heart DMZ with a slash through it.
Alrighty, so I think that's that. Just yet again a reminder out there: if you want to list your top fives, head on over to the super group. There'll be a thread where you can post your top fives and let us know what we forgot and things that we may have missed entirely that we didn't even think about. So
I'm sure there are. The time stream is vast and diverse. Infinite number of futures we could have mentioned but didn't.
Yep.
Indeed.
And soon
And
enough,
while you're there at the Facebook supergroup, you can also look for the listing of categories for nominations for the Best of 2023 awards. You have until March 5th to get those ballots into us. Please be a part of the conversation.
100%. And soon there will be a time where perhaps we go back in time a little further, but that's further down the road. Plug.
Plug.
All right. Well, patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak. Once again, a reminder that you guys are awesome for keeping this show running. We really do appreciate everything that you do to make that happen. And we thank you so much. For as little as $1 a month, you guys keep these shows coming. And we thank you so much at patreon.com/Comic Geek Speak. And over to Shane for some more credits.
Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. As Ian said, stop by thecomicforums.vanillacommunity.com. Stop by the Facebook group. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/comicgeekspeak. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, send in your Muddle the Murds. Thanks to everyone who contributes to the show and supports us. We appreciate it. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
And now the present is the past, and now it's the future.